Chapter 41, Demon Lord's Castle 8. Saeng laughed as he thought of the conversation he had with Hansu before they got separated in the first tutorial area. If you really have thoughts of doing things properly, don't go to the central island and instead go to the Longlegs Island next to it and gain the shadow technique. You need to do, and then get to the island of the tower fast and wait at the for me. If some people say my name, then let them live, and if they don't, then kill them. If nothing comes out by the 32nd day, then just move out. Saeng made an astonished expression as he swung his sword. At first he wasn't sure, since nothing had happened despite it being 3 days since he started waiting here while hunting. But they had really come, and in a very weird way too. Is it teleportation? Saeng didn't really know about that, but he believed in the words of Hansu. It's probably that psychic power again, and it seems like I won't have to worry about whether I should kill them from the way they're talking. He didn't know their identities, but everyone here had to die with one order from that guy over there. Saeng started to hack crazily at the clansmen who had appeared in front of him in a mess. SSSGGK. QAK. OSG. Well, though there's a lot of them, they're a total mess. And the might of the skill shadow technique that he obtained from the location, Hansu had told him, was amazing. It might have been a little hard without this. A large amount of runes, skills and artifacts dropped every time he slashed. These were people of the strongest special forces and lords with expensive artifacts. It was reasonable for them to drop a lot. Saeng used a moment of carelessness to slash one, and then stole the weapon of another only to swing it around crazily. This crazy bastard, who are kook. Talk too much. Gukti tried to run backwards, but his head was cut off in the end. It seems like a few things these guys drop seem more valuable than the others. Saeng shrugged his shoulders as he looked at them. He wasn't really tempted, since the shadow technique was a great gift by itself. But he had told me to keep these things. Let's see. Since they came before the earring of 7 siblings he had told me to get, the next is. Saeng smiled at the shadows swaying around him, and then disappeared into the dark forest after picking up all the artifacts and runes. Qjudug. Damn it, keep the formation. Fuckers, if you want to live, then hold on more. Hold on to another 5 minutes. The people had cleared up and were chopping apart the undead crazily. And the 2 clans were throwing attacks ruthlessly around Hansu. Their numbers had decreased rapidly in a short time, and only 600 were left. Damn it, is it almost done now? Tejan took a deep breath as he thought of what happened earlier while grinding his teeth. Right after Gukti went up, people's symbols disappeared, and the control over them had disappeared. And the chaos that had come after. It wasn't that the people turned into emotionless puppets after receiving the symbol. It's just that they would act normally, and only when they receive an order from the lords would they move to follow the orders the best they could. They had known the current situation clearly, and had realized what they needed to do in order to survive as soon as the symbol disappeared. They started to struggle in order to buy time, while creating distance between them and the demon lord. Tejan had wondered what this scene was at first. Did Gukti kill them all? Then, why did he take them up? There were tons of things that were unclear, but this wasn't the important part. Hansu, Yeren, and Tejan started to repair the formations quickly. And they had reached the current situation. About 400 people were chopping apart the undead crazily, and Yeren and Tejan's clans were assaulting the demon lord whom Hansu had tied up. The 2 clans were fighting much better than he expected. The 2 clans were made of special forces who had filled up the spots after they had sent out part of the normal clansmen. A decision which was made due to the dire situation. If the special forces didn't participate in the fight, then they would all die. They had slowly increased to number around 130, but Gukti's special forces had left, and a few had died, so the remaining 100 had been absorbed into Yeren and Tejan's clans. In a normal situation, they had to receive the symbol with an agreement from both sides. and the special forces were actually reluctant to join the clans, since they will be ordered around by others and will have to fight against the demon lord. If only Hansu didn't speak to them. If you don't fight now, then I'll fall back too. Shall I run around for 15 minutes? 15 minutes was enough time for that thing to smash apart the remaining 600 people. So the special forces received the symbols almost by forcing themselves, since they realized that there was no other way. And as Hansu and the two clan lords blocked off the demon lord completely, the remaining non-clansmen started to fight against the undeads. They couldn't run away anyway, and fighting undeads was much less of a burden. With the two thoughts of it being doable and there being no other choice, the people started to fight much more actively in the front. Kyujuduk. Yujuduk. Hold the line for a little longer. Tijin shouted urgently as he looked at the almost killed demon lord. It was much easier to fight since the clan lords saving their own bodies had disappeared, and their special forces were now under them. While Hansu was pulling the demon lord's aggro and suppressing it, the 100 special forces controlled by the clan lords were assaulting it with attacks. If they continue at this pace for 10 more minutes, then they could kill it without problems. But Tijin's mind was urgent, since 10 minutes was too long of a time. Damn it, the crystal will open up soon. The only reason why they were able to focus on the fight with the demon lord was because the non-clansmen were blocking off the undead that the demon lord summoned. What would the non-clansmen do when the crystal opened up? Would they simply go, "Oh, we shall kill the undead for the hard-working clansmen"? They will all run away while they are fighting against the demon lord. They couldn't back off before they could kill the demon lord anyway. Hansu and the two special forces were in a balance with the demon lord, so if one of them were to back off, then the remaining two will suffer greatly. They would get picked off one at a time then, and the others will all escape during that time. At this moment, a giant ray of light shone in the distance. Fuck, if it's going to open, at least open quietly. A light had come out from the crystal, which was so large that wherever one was in the island they could see it and know the portal opened. And at the same time, the crystal that was embedded on the ground floated up as a black hole, which could be identified as a portal with a glance, opened up in the center of the crystal. The people who had seen the hole stopped. They glanced at each other and then started to madly charge towards the crystal. Fuck, don't block it. Damn it, I'm going up. Chaos. Casualties were occurring during this time, but the people were heading towards the crystal fervently anyway. Damn it. As the non-clansmen stopped focusing on the undead, the remaining undead started to slowly gather around the demon lord. Damn it, do we really have to kill that thing? Let's get out. Hansu shook his head at Tijin's words. If they leave recklessly in such a situation, then they would receive a huge amount of casualties. If they run towards the crystal, then the demon lord would chase them and kill off everyone who was focused on running away. It needed to be finished off now. Hansu chuckled as he saw them. Tijin sighed roughly as he saw this. Damn it, then take the demon lord in front of the crystal. Wouldn't the non-clansmen have to fight against the undead then? If their escape route was blocked, then they would come to their senses and attack the undead again. But Tijin soon realized that such a thing would be hard to accomplish. It would take too long to drag the demon lord in front of the crystal, in the distance with no casualties. And on the other hand, if they were to bring the demon lord in front of the crystal before the non-clansmen left, then the amount of casualties would become huge. If too many of the special forces die, then the demon lord would become too hard to kill, even if the undead problem was gone. Hansu laughed at these words, since he never thought such a thing wouldn't happen. It isn't possible to bring the demon lord in front of the crystal. But the opposite was possible. As I saw before, when the crystal activates, it floated up in the air. You can bring it then. Wait for a moment. Hansu, who had thought of the words of heirs, grabbed onto the scythe part of Judgment of Decrados, which was tied onto the demon lord, and then started to run towards the crystal at an extreme speed. Pabababag. Endless amounts of daggers were thrown out of Hansu's hands, and Hansu jumped from dagger to dagger as he charged towards the crystal. The undead tried to attack from below, but the height at which Hansu was running was too high. And soon he arrived at the crystal, and then started to tie up the crystal with the chain after laughing at the people running towards it. "Uzu, what are you doing?" "Hey," Hansu spoke as he looked at them. "Let's combine our strengths, guys." As soon as his words ended, the demon lord shook his body with an enraged scream. Kuang. And then the crystal, which was floating in the air, started to get pulled by the immeasurable amount of force and started to fly off. If the crystal was embedded on the ground, then the chain would have snapped, since the demon lord's strength was that fearsome. But the chains didn't snap because the crystal was floating in the air, and the crystal, which could not resist the strength of the demon lord, flew towards it. Kung. "It's hard. It won't break with this much then. I wonder if I can take it closer." Maybe it was due to the fact that it could transport more people. The crystal in the demon lord's castle was much sturdier than the crystal at the castle. Hansu followed behind it as he pushed it. And when the crystal neared the battlefield, he untied the chain around the crystal. Hansu laughed because if you take into account the crystal's hardness, then it was safe from destruction from the demon lord, but it was in a location where one could not recklessly run into the portal. "No free rides, work your worth." Hansu ended his words and then charged towards the demon lord again, and the faces of the non-clansmen who were heading towards the crystal turned dark, since it looked like they would get swept up if they tried to go for the crystal. No, the people fighting there wouldn't allow them to do so in the first place. Tejan sighed as he looked at this scene, since now it looked like they could kill the demon lord. "We're finally going up." Did Hansu say he was going to the island of the tower? Wherever they went, they were able to leave this damnable central island. Tejan stared at Hansu, but then threw away unnecessary thoughts as he focused at the demon lord in front of him. Gukti died. As one guy muttered while sitting on top of a giant beast, the woman next to him smirked as she spoke. "I told you already, don't place your trust in such half-wits. Why would they send a guy like him when they had plenty of people with ability? No, he did a good job, far beyond what I had told him." Gukti had done more than he asked. Only an unexpected event occurred at the last second. "Hethi." While the woman made an expression of curiosity, the guy, Wonjiang, laughed as he shook his head. "It's nothing. We'll meet eventually. Let's not worry about it and focus on what we were doing." Are Hansu and that masked guy related in some way? Lord Wonjiang mumbled inwardly, but then shook his head. Gukti did tell him that the location which one arrived at using the mini crystal was fixed. But how would Hansu know the location of such a place and send somebody of his own there? There was no possibility of such a thing. If Wonjiang had such an information, then he would also have done that. Well, it doesn't matter. He didn't know about the guy with the strange mask, but he would soon meet that Hansu guy. "Let's prepare ourselves." The woman who was standing next to Wonjiang nodded and then shouted loudly. "Surround this area and prepare your skills, and then hide until they all cross over." Wonjiang's clan, which was made of 100 people. They only had 85 currently because 15 were somewhere else, but their battle power was much greater than normal clans. Since while the others were killing beasts in a fair manner, these guys were killing people and had stolen their artifacts and runes. And the people who come up from below would be a huge mess. They couldn't lose such a great opportunity. "I wasn't like this originally. It seems like I've changed after I've gotten the symbol." The woman finished her thoughts as she asked Wonjiang. "Anyway, did you say that they would come this way if you wait here? At least the people coming up from the central island will." It seemed like the warp gates to the tower was different for every island below and were spread around the tower island. But if his calculations were correct, then the warp gate which connected with the central island below was this one. since it looked like the warp gates were set up, so the path was a straight line from the island of the tower to the other island. Others were like that too. Not everyone will come here, but there'll be quite a number who will. Since going through the island of the tower was the most efficient according to the island's map. Tusk, if he had taken care of everything below, then I wouldn't have to do such a thing. He wanted to kill them off one by waiting in front of the portal. But then if a clansman came up, the others below would know of it, and everyone would stop coming up. It had become much more tedious because 2 lords had survived. They had to wait as much as they could, and then kill them off when enough people grouped up. Well, I can't kill them all, but it wasn't bad for something you could gain by waiting a little bit. They just needed to kill as many as they can, and then go into the tower. Since there will be plenty of chances. I'm not sure how many will come up, but hurry and come. It'll be nice if that Hansu guy is there too. Wonjung laughed coldly. Chapter 42, Tower 1. Kuraruru. Tijin sighed as he looked at the shredded corpse of the demon lord. We finally killed it one way or another. Another chaotic situation would have occurred if runes came out, so he was worried, but no runes came out, thankfully. The undead all turned into dust and flew away after the demon lord died, and the people who were up against the undead all crashed down. Around 500 people, a lot survived. If you take into account the event in the middle, and when everyone ran trying to save their lives, quite a lot survived. Tusk. He didn't like the non-clansmen over there, but the fact that random lives had not been lost was not bad. At that moment he could see Hansu, who was searching around the demon lord's corpse, approaching him with a complex expression. Tijin made an expression of confusion as he looked at him. What's wrong? Then Tijin looked at the bloody red marble in his hands. Kang Hansu strength colorless, 20.8%. Stamina colorless, 21.1%. Agility colorless, 16.7%. Perception colorless, 17.7%. Mana colorless, 15.7%. Magic colorless, 15.7%. Physical resistance colorless, 15.7%. Magic resistance colorless, 15.7%. It's not bad. Hansu nodded. If you take into account the fact that he had raised Nirmaha's ring by feeding it runes, then it was a number which wasn't bad for a month's work. The normal runes were prepared for the tutorial stage from the start, so they rose fast, but increasing the experience on colorless runes was not easy. Making one of the runes into a red rune within the 3 months of the tutorial was a great feat. Because having one red rune meant that you are a beginner who has the prerequisites to travel the red area. And the demonic jade crystal in his hands had a close relationship with these runes. Demonic jade crystal. It increases all of your runes into 99.99% the second you eat it. An amazing hack of an item. The difference between 99.99% and 0.01% was like heaven and earth, even if they were the same colorless runes. And that was why raising the experience was hard also. But of course there are shortcomings with it too. First, it only lasted a single day. And the second fault on it was a bit more extreme. After that day, all the runes will drop to 0.01%, and he needed to start all over from there. It was most similar to a forbidden medicine that exploded your potential like those from old martial hero stories. And because of this, he couldn't use it randomly. Only one chance at using this item. The final dungeon, and from there the third gateway. Turn all my runes into red runes, then use it. This is the most efficient way to use it. Only colorless runes and normal runes came out in the second stage of the tutorial. And because of this, the perfect situation one could be in is getting 8 red runes at 0.01%. Basically becoming an expert. This means an adventurer whose runes had all reached the red stage. But that was still a bit lacking. And that was why this thing was needed. If he uses this, then he will become a master whose runes are all at the peak. And there aren't any risks either. Since he started at the 0.01% anyway, he will just be going back to where he was. I must save it until then. There was no need to focus on raising the runes, since there was another plan for that. He needed to focus on other things before that, like this demonic jade crystal. Just gaining this in the central island means success. And it was even better since he had gained the Decrato set. But there was still another problem. Hansu put away the demonic jade crystal as he spoke to Tijin and Yaren. We hunted together, but only this came out. I really need this. I can't share it with you, but I can give you anything else we gained from the hunt, so speak out what you want, both of you. He needed to distribute things fairly. He couldn't give away this item, but he also couldn't ignore the two clans who had hunted the demon lord together with him. Tijin and Yaren looked at each other for a while, and then chuckled. Just take it. We would have all died without you anyway. We even gained more special forces thanks to you. A few of their clansmen had died, but their overall strength had increased by far, since they had filled 50 of the 100 people limit with special forces. Hansu pondered for a moment and then spoke to the both of them. What are your plans from here onwards? Tijin and Yaren said very simply. Go to the tower. Hansu shook his head at those words. He wasn't sure if the dark mad lord was going to wait in front of the entrance above. But that guy probably knows about the situation in the central island. He should also know that Gukti had died, which means that he could assume that a lot of people from here would survive and come up. He might have prepared something, or he might not have, but he couldn't ignore the dangers due to unexpected chances, since he will be an entirely different existence from the previous clans. Full frontal fights would not be easy. Let's see, I cannot let them do something good for him. Hansu looked around at his surroundings. Nobody's coming. Changhe, who was standing next to Wenjiang, asked, Is there a possibility where this guy is wrong? He could make mistakes because he was a human, but it was rather wondrous since they had never seen him make a mistake. Before Changhe could finish her thoughts, a single person appeared from the giant circle in front of them. But Changhe clicked her tongue, since it was a familiar face. Dislikable guy. That guy over there was hard to trust, because his attitude changed back and forth too fast. Well, that was probably why he acted as the person close to Hansu. Changhe spoke out to the guy who had just come up, Hyunwoo, as she looked at him. Didn't you say you had a friend called Tihi? Hyunwoo shrugged his shoulders. She was just for cover anyway. What's there to call a friend when we had only seen each other a few times? She died on the way. While Changhe was clicking her tongue, Wenjiang asked Hyunwoo while staring at him. But it seems you're alone. Did the rest die? Hyunwoo shook his head at Wenjiang's words. Nope, exactly 531 people survived. But none of them came to the island of the tower. It might have been different if they had all died, but for that much to survive and not come to the island of the tower. The island of the tower was a very alluring location. Hyunwoo sighed at those words. That guy fucked it all up at the last moment. Then Hyunwoo thought of the words which Hansu had said to the people at the last moment. If you guys are thinking of going to the island of the tower, then think about it very well. It looked very sweet on the island's map, but remember that it was just like that for the central island as well. No one would come if they hear that, but is there really a chance for nobody to come like this? The thing about a person's greed is that it usually did not work out the way they wanted, but for none of the 500+ people to have come. Hyunwoo added a few more words at that. It's because they all know what happens if they ignore his words now. He's really a talented fellow. Wenjiang clicked his tongue inwardly. The people who had survived there would probably be much stronger than the ones who had gone through other islands. This was the perfect chance, since they would be a mess from fighting the demon lord and the undead. Well, if it didn't work, then there's nothing I can do about that. If Hyunwoo spoke out, then he would only arouse suspicions. Did you check where the Hansu guy went? Hyunwoo shook his head. I don't know about that, but I did see him going into the crystal. Wonjeong shrugged his shoulders as he rose from the seat. Well, that's enough then. Since we did everything we needed to do here, let's go into the tower. Hyunwoo asked at these words. Doesn't your heart ache? We got nothing out of the central island in conclusion. Wonjeong spoke as he laughed. What's there to have a heartache over? It was one failure out of many, and we killed a lot of the lords too. And according to my senses, the thing we'll gain from the tower will be much greater. The island's map never lied. The thing they would gain from the tower would be much sweeter than the thing they would gain from the central island, and wouldn't be comparable in terms of quantity and quality. Hansu, that guy, I'm disappointed. He didn't know about others, but he felt like that guy would come up at least. But for him to dodge him like this, there probably won't be much difference, huh? That guy probably didn't know since he hadn't gotten to the island of the tower yet, but everyone eventually gathered to the tower, and there would be more instances where they would collide. Meeting him, then, will just be the end of it. Though we won't meet for a while, I should at least give warnings. But this guy, why doesn't he have any distinctive features? Wonjeong sent a message to the 15 people in other places. Be cautious of a guy with a chain scythe and a dagger and report it once you spot him. Finish off what I asked and then come into the tower. I'll see you above. Wonjeong, who had sent messages to the people all around, shrugged as he spoke. Let's go. At those words, a large amount of people started to walk slowly towards a location. Towards the giant black tower that pierces the skis in the center of the island. A long while after the circle shone, as it spat out another person. Hansu, who had come out of the circle, checked his surroundings. Clear signs of people. It was definite that a clan was waiting for people here. Hansu smirked as he looked at these. I knew this would happen. The Dark Mad Lord always liked to be doing something, so he wasn't good at waiting. A very diligent guy from a point of view. Though the fact that he was working diligently on crazy things was the regrettable part. He had used Arankle's bracelet to pretend entering the crystal, and then waited nearby while hiding. Though they could have spotted him if they looked hard enough, they probably didn't expect him to do such a thing in a situation where they were trying to get into the portal. He had fooled that Hyunwoo guy like that. Who would get fooled if you stick around like that at all times? While that guy was looking around at him, he was doing the same. The result was that he was very suspicious. It might have been different if he didn't know about the Dark Mad Lord. But that wasn't the case. Anyways, Hansu had waited until everybody left, healed his body completely, which was exhausted from fighting the Demon Lord, and then came through the crystal. Since this amount of time would have been enough for them to have left. It's too tedious to go around. Hansu then looked towards the tower in the distance. The final level, as well as the stage of the second tutorial. The tower in the center was piercing the clouds up above, and many islands were floating around the tower. And like branches of a tree, black bridges from the tower extended to connect to those islands. If you were to start at the island where the tower was standing then, you could sweep up from below, but even if you were to start at the nearby islands, you would eventually go into the tower. This was why he pondered going to other islands, but then he might not be able to gain what he wanted. Since if he went to other islands, he will start at a different floor, and not on the first floor. Let's start. He was going to prepare faithfully for the final dungeon, since this was his first target, and the Dark Mad Lord was going to be included within it. Hansu grinned as he organized his gear. I'm not sure if that Hyunwoo guy remembered my physical traits well or not. Hansu pushed down the justice of Decratos deep within his thigh. At the same time, he shortened the length of the chain on Judgment of Decratos as much as he could, wrapped it around his waist once, fixed it firmly onto his back, and then covered it with his cape. And soon it was almost like the two weapons disappeared. Hansu then proceeded to grab onto a sword he had picked up randomly before coming in here. a decent-level Padao that a dead adventurer was holding onto. Hansu's image instantly turned into a mediocre level which you could find anywhere. Well, Hansu's image wasn't what caught the eye in the first place. But this wasn't enough. Hansu quickly moved out. Since there was a place, he agreed to meet that guy. After a while, a very familiar face came into view. "Hey, Hansu." Hansu laughed as he spoke. "Thanks." Saeng grinned. "It's a win-win. Anyways, here it is." Saeng handed over a small earring, an artifact which Hansu had asked for him to get along with the shadow technique. Earring of 7 siblings. It absorbed the user's mana constantly as it changed the user's appearance to one of the 7 which was saved onto it. Saved some time thanks to him. Hansu put on the earring on his hand, and as he inserted mana onto it, his face changed. No, not only his face, but his whole body made crackling sound as it changed. Saeng made a scared expression as he looked at this. "Is it okay for you to do this?" Saeng had actually used this before, since it was much more charming than the mask. But this wasn't something where one could change their face however they wanted. It was something which changed their whole body onto one of the 7 saved images. Of course, the battle power decreased, and Saeng, who had realized this, gave up using it and put on the mask. But Hansu shook his head. This is good enough. He needed to do at least this much. He couldn't fool the enemy just because he had changed the face a little bit, since the adventurer's perception was too high for that. Since that was basically covering one's nose with a biscuit and then saying that they have disguised themselves. They would be found out by other adventurers who had memorized the shape of their entire body. He needed to change his whole body structure as so. It does decrease my battle power, but this is enough. This wasn't the important part. Hansu made an expression so cold that it was fearsome. Everyone should remember me to some degree by now. The 500 people of the central island remember him. The clansmen of the Dark Mad Lord remember him. Rumors about him would be spread far and wide. He does not kill people. He sticks by the rules. He tries to fight in the front and also tries to save as many people as he can. This much was enough for him to create an image. Heirs, this should be enough. And now it was time for him to keep Keldian's last will. Dark Mad Lord, until I come find you, keep doing well. Hansu laughed coldly at the tower in the distance. /earring /shadow /tower /b/ if /master /expert /demonic /beginner. Chapter 43, Tower 2. Hansu, who had sent off Saeng, looked at the tower in the distance as he got lost in thought. It seems like I will need to play hide and seek. He's a real talent, huh? Hansu clicked his tongue. They could choose because the structure of the tower was unique, to either move in small groups or in large groups, and a fitting difficulty and reward is prepared from that. Normal clan lords would try to move by combining all their forces, since they had done so until now and since it was safer this way. But this guy was different. There isn't enough time for us to kill off everyone else by moving around in a big group. Separate and move with a mindset of killing 10 people per one person. Monopolize the chances that would be given to 10 people, and then take the runes from those corpses. With such thoughts, he splits up his clansmen and then mixes them in between other adventurers. A method that was possible because he was confident in each individual member's abilities, and because they could communicate with each other no matter where they were in the tower. It would actually be eye-catching if they were to move in groups, but moving in small killer squads allowed them to pretend they're normal adventurers between other people, and then wipe them off during decisive moments. People who had died from the Dark Mad Lord's small killer squads had numbered over 1,000 in the past, and these killer squads had monopolized around 1,000 people's worth of artifacts and runes, and had reached a point where they could openly massacre people, and no one could do anything to them. Since they were all separated, he had to find and kill them off one by one as he climbed. There was no need to look out for his image because he had transformed himself, but he hadn't done this to just kill normal adventurers to turn them into runes. He had changed in order to get as close as he could to the dark mad lord, who knows of his appearance, to cut off his neck in a single swipe. It won't take that long. Hansu thought of this and that, and laughed coldly as he slowly walked towards the tower. After a long walk, the people inside the tower greeted Hansu. "A newcomer has come. I'm called Suhan. What about you?" Hansu made a befuddled expression at the words of the man in the front. I have to choose a name." Since he was a different person, he had to make a separate name. Since he wasn't Kang Hansu anymore. Hansu laughed as he spoke his name. "My name is..." "Is that the tower?" Chulman frowned as he looked at the giant tower in the distance. How hard had it been getting to this point? Chulman looked around him cautiously as he walked. At the same time, he glanced at the giant tower in front of his eyes. Giant tower. Many entrances existed in all directions, but not many differences could be seen. Do I just need to go in? Chulam chose one of them, and then headed in carefully. The passageway was long, which was befitting of the giant tower. As he followed the tunnel in, a giant circular plaza came out. This is... Chulman checked his surroundings instinctively. Hundreds of entrances had surrounded the plaza, and a few of them already had closed doors. And above the entrance there were various numbers. Some said 1 and others said 50. Some big ones even said 80. Similarities between them was that to the inside of the entrance was not a passageway, but rather a small room. What is this? But that wasn't the only peculiar part. People who had grouped up in the corner. 9 people. It was only 9, but he couldn't let his guards drop. Whilst Chulman was on guard, the guy in the very front spoke out as he looked at him. "Don't be so anxious. We're meeting each other for the first time here too." The others couldn't drop their guards, but had their curiosity perked at these words. What was the reason for 9 strangers to group up? And the fact that 9 people were mixed into the group was also strange. "Why are you gathered so?" The man who was standing in the front, Suhan, replied at Chulman's words. "I'm called Suhan. Well, since you're alone, I can guess to some extent. There's really nobody you can trust, huh?" Chulman frowned at these words. Correct. He had felt this while going up the other islands. That there was really nobody he could trust. No, this damnable fairy had made it so. He didn't resent it. They only had one life. Who in the world would give up their life for somebody else? Since he was like that too. Suhan smiled as he looked at Chulman. "But what do we do? It seems we have to group up again no matter what. You're the 10th person. It said we needed one more person." While Chulman was making a confused expression, the fairy appeared in the sky. "I welcome you to the tower. Hee. This is a land of opportunity. Of course, everywhere in the tutorial is like that, but this place is even more so." And at that moment, a small map had appeared within Chulman's hands. This is... Information about the hundreds of doors nearby was written on it. 2-man room, Aranan's crown, Kokolka's elixir, closed. 9-man room, 7-stripe cape, Karan's doll, closed. 10-man room, Rorapin's sharp hook, circlet of Kilidarape. 47-man room, Kelpin's sub-equipment, sword of Akin. 80-man room, Divine Wrath, sword of lightning, closed. 80-man room, King's sword, closed. By pressing it, he could even read descriptions about the options on these. King's sword, diving wrath, they even give this. Isn't this a bit too much? While Chulman made a flustered expression, the fairy smiled as it spoke. This is a friendly care for you guys. You've seen instances of people moving in large groups in the islands below, right? Chulman nodded his head. Damn, that's really out of the norm. How do you want us to go against such things? Clan Lord. Their psychic power was fascinating itself, but it was also very superior. 50 to 100 people moved about in groups. How did they expect them to win against that? He had gone through 2 islands on the way here, and one of them had a lord on the island. It was an island that could hold 100 people, but the whole time while he was there the island was basically controlled by the lord who lead 50 people. I was watching from above but few. How would the people traveling alone live from such sorrows? So we prepared this for you. This way you won't be in a disadvantage because you lack numbers right. He realized it then. What the 2-man room and 3-man rooms meant. A game which could be played with 2 people. A game which could be played with 3 people. Clearly, if you were to do this, then the chances of going against clans go down substantially. It seemed like large rooms, such as 80-man rooms, were rooms that clans had targeted and entered. Since it was that dangerous, but had enormous rewards to go with it. The 2-man rooms or 3-man rooms seemed like they were all closed due to people coming ahead, but rooms such as 10-man rooms were still left. This is what they meant when they said when they were waiting for me. They wanted to go into the 10-man room, but they couldn't because one was lacking. But Chalman looked at the fairy with an extremely suspicious expression. These flies are friendly. How could they be? But at that moment, he heard Suhen's voice calling at him. There's no point of pondering over it, since the lowest one right now is the 10-man room. As if the people ahead of them had similar thoughts, all the 2-man to 9-man rooms were long closed. Well, since they could enter by gathering for a small time, it would have been filled up quickly. He was alone. The 10-man room was the least burdensome. If he missed this chance and were to enter a 11-man room with a group of 3-4 people, then it would be extremely hard on him. There's no way that it wouldn't have set something up. Chalman nodded his head as he went into the room which had 10 written on the entrance, along with the 9 people. As 10 people got into the room, the doors made a grinding noise as they closed. Kagagyuguang. And soon the small room with 10 people moved about aggressively as it started to dig deep into the tower. Kayak. Kyujudug. Chalman cut off the neck of the beast which was charging at him. The beast, which had the shape of a red ant, spat out a rune, after having its head cut off by Chalman's black medium-sized greatsword. Let's see, did he say we should get the things from whatever we killed ourselves? He didn't drop his guard against the 9 of them, even whilst he was hunting. At the same time, he was inspecting them the whole time. First, it seems like these guys know how to play as a team. Maybe it was because they were cautious of each other, or they had decided that it wasn't the time for them to fight each other, but a clear rule was set between the 10 of them. The 2 basic rules which said that they had to fight in the front and distribution of runes and artifacts were according to their contributions. As I expected, there's a difference in levels. The 3 which were composed of 2 men including Suhen and a female were really strong, since it looked like the 7 others could not beat these 3. That guy called Youngyi is strong too. The 4, including himself, were at a decent level. There were 3 of them who were weaker than him. Thankfully, there isn't anyone who wants to take over because they're strong, and the girls are fighting well too. Being a female did not mean they were weak. No, the fact that their poisonous aura could be felt at every swing of their sword showed how hard it was to get to this point. But then a thought came up in Chalman's head. This is too simple. Of course, he didn't mean the difficulty itself was hard. Since if it was that easy, then it wouldn't have taken them a wild day to get here. Just like the name of the 10-man room, the difficulty was set so 10 people needed to work well with each other in order to clear it. It would have been hard on them if they had 8 or 9. The difficulty played a huge role to the fact that they were all keeping by the rules while advancing forward. If it was too hard or too easy, then the relationship between the people would be much worse than it is now, since a person would have separate thoughts when they were in dire situations or had leisure. But because of this, they felt much more at ease. The fairy didn't set anything up. While Chalman was surprised, Suhen swung his sword while shouting energetically. It seems like all 10 of us could survive this way. Let's stay strong. Chalman nodded at these words. Yeah, let's first focus on advancing forward. who would enjoy killing and stealing things from them. If they could combine their forces, then doing so was the best. They would all become zealous since their lives were on stake, and have their own circumstances. Just like him. Damn, I'm not sure if I can find Suhi. Chalman grinded his teeth. He had to survive and find his daughter, who he had separated from during the ticket-stealing wars. His daughter Suhi and him. The two of them weren't strong enough to gather 3 tickets, so they had to get a third random member and go up with 3 tickets. Since they would have lost their tickets and died there if they had remained a bit longer. It had been a month since he had been separated with Suhi. Insecurities rose up from deep within, but he couldn't do anything. He could only search fervently. Swinging the sword about crazily, the location of their goals could be seen. A clearly different place in comparison to the jungle-like environment around them. Chalman sighed a breath of relief. It seems like we're almost there, old man. Chalman looked to the side towards where the voice came from. A girl who was swinging the sword diligently beside him. One of the 3 weakest people. Did she say she was Minhee, who Suhi is just about that age too? Chalman sighed, because thoughts of Suhi sprang up again by looking at her. Yeah, but it's good because evil people don't exist here. Minhee shook her head as she spoke. You don't know by looking at them from the outside. Chalman grinded his teeth. It was just as she said. There might be somebody who was looking for a decisive moment. And will it finish like this? There might not be any evil people. But when a situation changes, the people turning evil wasn't even a big deal. Chalman, who had been lost in thought, flinched as he looked at the location where they had arrived at. There isn't just one door. The doors which were laid in front of them weren't just one. Exactly 10 doors for 10 people. This doesn't feel good. Chalman and the others frowned. /10/80/80/47/10/9/2/ Chapter 44, Tower 3. At that moment, the fairy appeared above everyone's head. While Chalman frowned, the fairy quickly started to babble. Hello, everyone. Congratulations on clearing a room. Hee. It was decent enough for 10 people to clear, right? Everyone unconsciously nodded at these words. It took about a day for them to get through one room. And runes had come out too. The fairy spoke as it looked at these people. Well, it's exactly at the difficulty for 10 people, but isn't the reward a bit too lacking for a day's worth of work? Everybody flinched. Looking at it again. They had ignored it because they were hunting the beasts whilst being on guard with the nearby people. But it seems like the beasts they had killed had not dropped a single artifact. This is a bit troublesome. Artifacts and skills were important beyond anything else. Runes did not create a substantial gap, and even if there was a gap, it was still possible to catch up to it. But a good artifact or a skill was different. Chalman had an incident where he collided against somebody of similar skill level as him. A guy who tried to rape a woman. Thoughts of his daughter enraged him and made him collide against him. Of course, he had calculated that the guy would realize their skill levels and then refrain from colliding against each other. But this was a misconception. They were at similar levels in terms of strength, but a huge difference was made at a decisive moment due to their artifacts. He had almost died because his sword had broken apart after colliding against that guy's sword a few times. If you take into account the fact that the difficulty of the tower would continue to increase, then the level of one's artifacts could not stay stationary. The fairy smiled while looking at the people trapped in their thoughts. Come on, everybody. We aren't that heartless. We've prepared it right here. Since it has taken around 1 day, the rewards should be around this much, right? The fairy pointed towards the entrance. The people who saw this stopped for a moment. Artifacts were placed in front of the 10 doors. Artifacts that were listed under the 10-man room on the map. Rorapin's sharp hook. Circlet of Kilodorate. Hall's glove. Chalman asked the fairy. Do we just need to take one of them then? 10 people, 10 doors, 10 variety of artifacts. It was quite an obvious choice. The fairy grinned at these words. How could that be? Only one out of those 10 doors will open. One. Then 10 people would go through one door, but only one artifact will be given. The fairy smiled as it spoke again. Could you first check the standards of those artifacts? Everyone pulled out their maps as they started to check the options of the artifacts. And then flinched. Why is there so much difference? Hall's glove, which was in front of the door which said 10, was pretty good, but it was something one could achieve by working just a bit harder. And 10 of them existed too. On the other hand, the single Roropin's sharp hook, which was in front of the room with 1 or 2 of circlet of Killader rape, in front of the room with 2, were at a level which couldn't even be compared to something like Hall's glove. An overwhelming difference in power. The fairy laughed as it saw this. The figure listed in front of the door isn't a number. It is something that tells you about how many could survive. The number of people leaving this room alive hangs on your decisions. Hee hee. It's not bad to choose the 10th door and leave together in a nice manner with Hall's gloves, though I wouldn't recommend it due to the structure of the tower. Fucking. It wasn't just a problem of this moment. He would just be dead meat if he was to take the Hall's glove, and was to face a crossroad of choice like this and meet somebody who had killed off the other 9, and had gotten something like the hook. Chalman cursed out loud as he gripped the sword in his hands. The moment they started to move away from each other, Suhen shouted out, "Wait, come to your senses. Isn't it a safer choice to get through the next level together as 10? Everyone flinched at these words. Of course it was logically better to have 9 comrades than a single weapon like that. And even more so if you take into account that you were the one who might die during the fight. The fairy smiled. I don't know, hee hee. Is it okay for you guys to be at such a leisure when this is just a start, after this room? Suhen aggressively glared at the fairy as he shouted. Shut up. Everyone flinched as they got away from Suhen. That guy, what are his thoughts, to go up against the fairy? Chalman looked at Suhen with a worrying expression. He felt bad for him because though Guy's personality was pretty good, he was about to get killed by the fairy. But the fairy didn't act out and instead made an amused expression as it spoke. What an aggressive man. Can I really not speak about it then? But then a man in the corner spoke out. No, please continue. I must hear this out. The man looked at Suhen as he spoke. You shut up instead. Shouldn't we at least hear what is about to come? If you aren't going to take care of all our lives, then don't cut off important intel. Do you want to die or something? This bitch. Suhen glared at the man, but he could not swing his sword. Because that guy was one of the 3 strongest along with Suhen. If they fight here then, they would be helping them to choose the 8th room. The fairy continued to talk. It might not be bad to go along with 10 people, but you will cross against the people of other rooms, though the number of people you would get tangled up with depends on the room. Everyone became serious at these words. If they choose Hall's glove, then all 10 of them could survive. But going together at this moment did not guarantee them going together next round. No, it'll be good if we don't become enemies then. This was proven by previous experiences. And what if the people they meet in the next room had also been in a 10-man room, but chose the 3rd or 4th door? What if they were from a 40-man room and had chosen the 10th door? If you start at similar starting points, then the level of artifacts was the most important part. If they head off like this, then they have to go against people who are armed with much more powerful artifacts. Everyone's expressions turned cold. A definite decision to increase their chance of survival in this damnable structure. Keep on choosing the low-numbered door and arm themselves. It might be hard in the beginning, but once they grasp the advantage, the gap will continue to increase. But even though everyone had such thoughts, they couldn't move thoughtlessly, since there was no guarantee that they would be part of the winning side, even if they felt greedy. Suhen spoke cautiously whilst looking at everyone. Wait, if we fight here then we might receive injuries and get hurt, If we go into the next room in such a situation, then it'll still be dangerous. It's just better to go as 10. Oh, all your injuries would get healed as soon as you go through the door. We should at least give that much as service when you fought so hard to take over. Hee hee. Having a limb cut off is okay too, so fight well. This damnable. While Suhan was flustered from the fairy's words, Youngie looked at Suhan for a moment and then smirked. Why are you trying so hard to survive altogether? Quite a funny guy. What? Before Youngie's words ended, a woman started to walk towards Youngie's side. Suhan narrows his eyes. Meiji, one of the three strongest along with Youngie. What is? I just like the idea on this side. Let's do it simply. Those who want to be with us stick here. We can organize it roughly. Even if it isn't the first or second room, fifth room sounds good. Damn it seemed like they were talking quite a bit on the way here. Chalman grinded his teeth as he looked at Youngie and Meiji. They didn't predict things up to this point, but had shared some part of their thoughts. Suhan grinded his teeth and shouted at the scene in front of him. You crazy bastards! Why are you doing this when we can end it without fighting? Youngie laughed. We could end it without fighting, but it seems like if we were to do so here, then we would get eaten by those who had fought and won. That's what I've had to go through. Fuck. While Suhan grinded his teeth, Youngie clicked his tongue inwardly. It's going to take all day. As soon as his words ended, Youngie rushed out and swung his sword around him. Quajuduk. Ujuduk. Kuak. Chalman, who had been off guard, had his wrist cut off. He had tried to dodge backwards because he wasn't that dull, but his wrist had flown off because there was a bit too much difference from the start. Everyone who had seen this started to crazily head behind Suhan. They had all realized that they would all die if this was to continue. That guy was a maniac. You bastard. The opponent was too. But it was two of the three strongest people here. Damn, and that guy was hiding his true strength. Chalman grinded his teeth as he looked at Youngie. He had known that he was strong, but for him to be this strong. One could see how much muscle they had by looking, but there was no way to find out about the number of runes they had before they get into a full head-on clash. If one were to hide their skills like that, then there was no way to know. They would not be an opponent if they didn't group up with Suhan as the center. Youngie smirked as he saw this. Damn, it's the opposite effect. I had done it to get you guys to this side. Then there's only two people along with this lady. It was a very disadvantageous situation from one point of view, but Youngie didn't show it as he charged towards Suhan. And a sword fight had occurred after the other people had also charged in. This bitch die. You fucker, getting blinded by the artifact. Youngie and Meiji were strong, but Suhan was not a pushover either, and they also had an advantage in numbers. And everyone, excluding Chalman, who was rendered unable to fight, started to send off a bloodthirsty aura from all around. No, there was still another person who was not involved in the sword fight. Hey Minhee. You ooh. The child who had barely held a sword up against the beasts was scared out of her wits and could not get near as the people started to clash with each other. Chalman, who had been clutching onto his wrist, looked at her with a sad expression. Words of her having to help out had came up to his throat. But he couldn't say so after seeing a child who was so scared. Damn Youngie, this bastard. Chalman tried to heal his wrist with all his strength, but it seemed like he won't be able to for a while because the ligaments in both of his hands had been cut off. And soon after the fight had ended. Kook. The result was that Youngie and Meiji had won. The skills which Youngie had hidden was really much higher than the norm. They had both become bloody, but the others could not even stand, and were all rolling about the floor with painful expressions. Meiji grinned as she looked at that Youngie. Who, you fight well, but why didn't you try to kill any of them? Is there a reason? Everyone had fallen to the ground, but none had died. Of course, they had their wrists cut off and had suffered extreme injuries, so they were unable to fight, but they were still alive. Young-yi laughed as he spoke. There's a reason for this, anyhow. At that moment, Young-yi's expression froze frightfully. And then he pushed Miji away. What are you? And in the spot where Miji had fallen from, a sword had flown past it with extreme speed. And the sword continued to swing as it stabbed Young-yi. Miji was able to dodge barely, but still had a deep wound on her shoulder, and Young-yi's abdomen was punctured from that. Kuwake. Young-yi mumbled at the handle of the sword which had gone through him. A speed which was not even comparable to the fight before. Young-yi coughed out some blood as he looked at Minhee, who had thrown the sword. Your skills, why did you stand still if you were this good? Minhee laughed coldly as she answered. No reason for me to act out when you are doing the work I was going to do for me. It's a first meeting somebody crazier than me. Lord, I've cleared this place easily. Minhee laughed as she sent Wonjung a message. She had been looking for a chance, but it was quite burdensome because the three were quite strong. And this was why she was going to look out for chances for a while, in order to aim for their backs when an even more dangerous situation occurred. The fairy had set it up, but she had clicked her tongue and given up, because it didn't seem like a fight would happen. But then that Young-yi guy started to fight with them. I've blown my nose without even touching it. Note, Korean saying meaning something was done without me having to do anything. This was why greedy people were good. It was hard to go against 10 people, even for them. But there was a reason why they had gone in 1 to 2 at a time. Since there was no need for them to fight them all alone. Things became really easy if 1 or 2 people like him existed. While Minhee was laughing quietly, Young-yi mumbled coldly in front of Minhee. You guys really have too much patience, for you guys to come out only when I do this. He had always felt it, but the problem with these guys was the fact that they had too much patience. That was why they would only come out when one had set up everything. It was going to be even more dangerous from now on. It'll be troublesome if he proceeded without taking care of such things. Tusk, though it'll heal, it hurts like hell. As soon as the room opened, everybody would get healed. Of course, there's nothing they could do about the ones who were dead. What? Even before Minhee could react, a dagger which had come out from around the thigh pierced Minhee's chest. It's the 2nd floor now, let's see each other soon. He would just kill off small fry like these on the way. The real goal is the guy whom he would meet on the 3rd floor. Hansu laughed coldly as he thought of the treasure hunt that would happen in the next room. Chapter 45, Tower 4. Everyone made a confused expression. What is going on? But Cholman just sighed. What was the point of thinking such things? They were going to die soon anyway. It didn't matter whether he died from Minhee's hands or Young-yi's hands. At that instant, something flew over at a very fast speed as it smashed his head. Poke! Damn it! Cholman fell unconscious as he felt his senses fade away. Young-yi, who had gotten the 8 others unconscious by throwing the daggers, walked up and chose the 9th room. Suruk. As he chose the dagger of the princess trapped in the tower, in front of the 9th room, the door opened, and the injuries of the people inside the room disappeared. Hansu chuckled at the people laid around on the ground with all their injuries healed, and then started to loosen up his body. Though they're a bit strong, one is easy enough. The underlings of the Dark Mad Lord are strong, since they had not only monopolized the runes of others, but skills and artifacts as well. But that differed from person to person. And one person could be taken care of simply by releasing the hidden strength. If it doesn't work out, then he could just take a blade, kill them off and just heal afterwards. Since that was his battle style anyway. Which means this girl's artifacts are mine. Hansu chuckled. There was no need to run around from place to place in order to gather artifacts in the tower, since the underlings of the Dark Mad Lord will make their way to him by themselves. Simple. They will set some things up and bring artifacts up with them. And he just needed to cut off their heads and take those. Hansu took the runes and artifacts that came out from her body and then showed a conspicuous color as he saw an item. 7-striped cape to wear something like this. Hansu made a slightly astonished expression. If she had activated this and fought, then it would really have been annoying. 7-striped cape. An amazing cape that increased the defense against 7 different kinds of weapons. It was hard enough fighting without the powerful artifacts, but this is great. This was a huge help in his situation where his stats had decreased and where he could not use the Decrato set. And even more so if you take into account of the fact that he would fight against other humans more often. The underlings of Dark Mad Lord will suspect him with it, but they won't be able to confirm, since it isn't the only one of its kind despite it being hard to obtain. Hansu, who had prepared some things, started to ponder about his future plans. There's 2 stages left. If he goes through 2 more things, then all the preparations for entering the final dungeon will be done. The first one of those, a well-imitated Philosopher's Stone. All the artifacts that are currently equipped on him are colorless ones, including the 7-striped cape and the Decrato set. But his runes will become red during the final dungeon. And of course, he could only fight the enemy if he prepares red gear. But that's impossible. It was quite obvious actually. How would he gain red gear in the colorless stage? To do that he needed to gain a growing artifact like Nirmaha's ring, and then feed it with a lot of runes to make it red. It would be impossible to cover his body with such artifacts. But the thing that made it possible was the weaker version of the Philosopher's Stone. If you turn it into powder and then apply it, the quality of the energy a weapon could absorb increases by 1 level. Though it's not like a new skill is unlocked like with the growing artifacts, the simple fact of it being able to absorb the red energy and not the colorless energy was still a huge improvement. Though there's a time limit, it's good enough. If you take into account of the size of that Philosopher's Stone, then he could probably turn all his gear into red artifacts while he is inside the final dungeon. I'm going to the room of the treasure hunt. This was a hidden piece which could be obtained in the 50-man room of the 2nd floor, at the treasure hunt. If you go to the 2nd floor from the 1st, then another circular plaza appears, and one would get into a group there again. As Hansu moved, his whole body made crunching sounds as it changed again. Soon Youngie had disappeared, and a completely different Hansu had appeared. He had knocked the others unconscious because of this. I can't get found out yet. Minhee had died in a single strike. Even if the messaging system existed, it was impossible to send the message about something happening suddenly. But unexpected events still happen. In order to accomplish the final level properly, he couldn't get found out by the clansmen of the Dark Mad Lord yet. Let's see, what should my name be this time? Hansu pondered for a moment and then made a simple decision. Let's do Changyi. Hansu chuckled as he started to walk into the darkness quickly. Kyujujujudo. The giant room, which was filled by 50 people, started to move with a small noise. These were all people who had accomplished the room on the 1st floor. It had taken a whole extra day to collect 50 people. These people were mostly not part of any clans. It was actually quite reasonable, since most clans had gone up to the 2nd floor right away from the start. Since most people here were people who had come up after clearing the mission on the 1st floor. Those guys have come too. Hansu laughed inwardly as he looked at Suhan and the others who were looking around the room. They were confused because the person who had come up before had disappeared. Well, they would probably think that I went into a different room. There were other rooms than this one on the 2nd floor. They would probably think that he had gone into one of those while they were unconscious. While they were thinking about this and that, the fairy's voice resonated throughout the room clearly. The thing you guys will do this time is the treasure hunt. The rule is very simple. You just need to search through all of the limited space here and find the treasure. Everyone frowned as they looked at the map and the view they could see outside of the room. It's too wide. Though it was of limited space, The size of the treasure hunting area was almost half the size of Uedo. Uedo is about 3 square kilometers. A bit too big for 50 people to roam around in. You just need to find this. While they were having numerous thoughts, a small spherical marble appeared in front of their eyes. A pretty normal marble, though it did shine. As everyone made strange expressions, the fairy laughed as it spoke. The treasure itself isn't an artifact, but rather an exchange ticket. If you bring this to the center, then I'll exchange it for you. Since there's a lot of different articles, it'll be fun pondering over it too. I'll show it to you in advance. Artifacts were shown row by rows in front of their eyes. It seemed like they varied from number 1 to 50. One artifact on number 1, and 50 of the same artifact on the 50th number. It was an obvious thought, but it seemed like that the lesser the number, the more precious it was. Everyone looked at the 50th one. Curatan's golden bludgeon. The artifact which you could gain 50 of was just a bit better than the weapons they were holding. A useful artifact, but not really at the level of being eye-catching. As you see it, the 50th one is, well, still useful, though it's not as good as the first one. Which artifact you would exchange for is up to you. Everyone's gaze had already been focused on the first item, even without the words of the fairy. Inkaran's golden cape. An item which boosted charisma, charm, luck by 15, and the 8 base stats by 5% too. The other options were amazing too. If you take into account that runes would be very hard to gain from now on, the price of this item was not even comparable to the other ones. Even if it wasn't the first item, items up to number 10 were pretty amazing, and items up to 30 were items that were a bit hard to gain by hunting. Only when you bring the treasure and exchange for the price in the center, the door to the next room will open. No one can leave before that. Not being able to leave was something they had already heard. They had come in here after taking that into account. The situation wouldn't be different in other rooms as well, so it was just better to start as soon as possible when 50 people had gathered. And who knows? They might find the treasure if they're lucky. Then let's start, hee. With those final words, the room clunked and stopped. And a giant jungle had appeared in front of them. The people glanced at each other and then separated into the giant jungle. Being in a team was not always the best option in such a place. Actually, it might be harder to find if you are grouped. But just before everyone was apart to separate, the fairy's voice resonated throughout the air. You didn't think that you'll just need to have some luck and find it first right. The treasure is guarded by protectors, which means that you'll be able to find the treasure if you kill the protectors one at a time, right? This is my small gift to you, since it'll be too hard to find without this information. One of the 128 would be protecting it. And then the images of the protectors appeared in air. All 128 of them. Everyone saw this and then frowned their faces. Fuck is not something I can kill alone. They realized instantly. Though they had gotten quite a bit of skills and runes, it was not something they could solve with just that much. It was at the level where they at least needed about 5 people to hunt it down safely. The people who were dispersing flinched, since they did not have any confidence in fighting those things alone. But there was no need for all 50 of them to group up. One person shouted loudly in the center, "Is there anybody who would go with me?" Everyone started to size each other up as they started to group up in 10s or so. The good thing about this treasure hunt was that multiple people could share the result. Since they couldn't do anything alone, it was better to group up and act together. There were actually a few people who weren't interested in the treasure among the crowd, since it seemed like it was better to hunt for runes in the time where they would fight to earn some crappy thing. And as I heard the explanation earlier, it seems like normal beasts gave artifacts too. It seemed like that the beasts were pretty good in giving out runes and artifacts in this place, which means the artifacts around the level of those in 40 to 50th spot were faster to earn through hunting. At that moment, a voice was heard in the air. "Oh yeah, there's one more thing. I promise this is really the last thing. It's because it'll be a bit boring if there is no tension, and I feel like there's some people here ignoring the prize. It doesn't matter who finds the treasure, but everyone without a prize in their hands will die before they leave. Remember this. There's only one treasure, but if the person who finds it exchanges it for Inkaran's gold cape before anyone can stop it, then everyone else but that person would die right. Okay, be strong. The time limit is 2 weeks. It meant that no matter how strong they were, they would all get massacred if one crazy guy exchanged the treasure for only one artifact and left this place. Everyone's expressions turned hard. Lord, I feel like I might be able to massacre everyone if I'm lucky. Wonjeong nodded at the clansman's words. Look for the chance as much as you can. Then we should start too. Uayak. Wonjeong laughed in joy, whilst looking at the room which was already in chaos as he moved his steps. Chapter 46, Tower 5. While everyone was being cautious of each other and mumbling about, Chulman cursed out loud. Damnable bitch of a fairy. 2 weeks. If they don't find the treasure within 2 weeks, then they would all die. Since no one will have the prize, they needed to exchange the treasure for in their hands. And 2 weeks, or 14 days, was definitely not a lot of time in order to kill all 128 of them. If they're unlucky, then the last protector might give the treasure too. Since the fairy would do things even worse than that. It seems like around 10 people were needed for them to get through the protector and gain the treasure without any casualties. Which means they needed to at least hunt 2 protectors a day with 5 teams of 10 people. If you take into account the time needed to rest after a hunt, 50 people had to hunt non-stop in order to kill all the protectors. Since the dungeon with the protector they saw from the images the fairy projected did not seem easy at all. At that moment, a person in the very corner of the 50 shouted out loud. Let's hunt by dividing into 5 teams of 10. One team can account for 2 protectors a day. Everyone turned towards him at these words. Those guys are. All 50 of them weren't that simple. But these guys were eye-catching even with just a glance. One of the 2 most dangerous households. A clan and only 10. It wasn't that they walked around with the words of clan written on their foreheads, but there was a huge difference in the actions between clansmen and non-clansmen. Because non-clansmen would constantly be stealing glances at each other, while clansmen are only looking out. The unique thing about these guys, though, was the fact that they only had a very small amount. Only 10. A miserable size compared to other clans. It was reasonable for them to not go to the 2nd floor right away and start at the 1st floor and even participate in the treasure hunt with such size. Though no one could understand why they only had 10. They're still dangerous. Suhan mumbled inwardly. Since there is a clear difference between clansmen and non-clansmen, even if their numbers are the same. At that moment, another voice was heard from the corner. I agree, 10 people will take care of 2 a day. This seems like the right choice. If you aren't able to follow, then compensate for it. One of the other 2 teams that caught the eyes. They didn't look like the clans here, but something else caught the eyes. They were all holding a precious-looking artifact. Did they kill off the rest in a 30-man room and come up? Their aura alone was mighty. Whatever happened, as the 20 people who looked like the strongest of the 50 agreed, the others fussed around as they nodded their heads. They didn't like following those people's orders, but the fact that they would all die if they did not find the treasure was right. They needed to think about it after they find it. Since the fight will be from that point on. If they conflict with each other and don't find the treasure, then it'll just simply be a massacre. About 10 people got into teams and then disappeared in multiple directions. And Hansu also watched the people dispersing and then walked towards the dungeon of the protector. I will accomplish the hidden piece first. The hidden piece he had, as the goal was Detective King. The requirements were very simple. Kill 32 protectors by yourself, and then collect the corresponding marbles which aren't the treasure. There were marbles behind the protector, 128 in total, since there were 128 of them. Only one of the marbles was a shining marble, and the ones who didn't shine were normal marbles. If you collect 32 of them, then they will trade it for the Philosopher's Stone. Kangti had accomplished this in the past, something he had gotten while collecting them just in case. It's easier to be alone in order to accomplish it in a short amount of time. Though it was easy when said, the difficulty of the dungeon of the protectors wasn't that easy. He will only be able to collect 32 if he releases the transformation and use his true body to progress quickly. Hansu quickly threw his body towards one of the dungeons of the protectors. Another protector has died. Congratulations. The people who had accomplished the dungeon made a tired expression as they heard the noise resonating throughout the island. People cursed it out loud. What is this? They don't give out anything, despite it being so hard. There were quite a bit of beasts on the way. They had given quite a bit of runes and artifacts for the 10 people to share, as if they were telling them to hunt them instead of going to the dungeons of the protectors. But then they won't be able to finish the 2 dungeons the team needed to accomplish a day. And that was the reason why everyone proceeded towards the dungeon, even while they were smacking their lips. They had some expectations actually. So many runes and artifacts were dropped, but the dungeon of the protector was said to be even harder. It was obvious that they expected an even greater amount of rewards. But the result was only a huge amount of disappointment. They had broken through the dungeon after a long time, but the amount of dropped runes and artifacts were minimal. And they so were hard that it was hard for them to accomplish 2 a day if they wanted to do it without taking any injuries. If this was the case, then they could only focus on killing the dungeons of the protectors. Damn, but there's nothing we can do. We all die if we don't find the treasure. Yeah, true. If they were unlucky, then the treasure will come out when they hunt the 128th protector. If they aren't able to find the treasure while leisuring about, then they won't even be able to get the reward. They would just all die. Let's go. While they were complaining and spitting words out one at a time, one of the people walking in the front turned around and spoke. Can I say something? Everyone looked at the person standing in the front. Well, to introduce myself simply, I am called Chalman, but the name isn't important. There's just something I want to tell you. As everyone's eyes focused, Chalman opened his mouth. Let's think. Even if we were to find this treasure, could we take this to the altar safely? And is there a meaning even if we were to take it there? Everyone made a skeptical expression. They didn't speak out, but they knew. They were confident in themselves, but 2 teams out of the 5, who had gone a different way, were at a different level. If they were to move about in teams of 10 and find the treasure and those guys decide to take them away forcibly, then they would only get it stolen from them. And the few hundreds meters of the area around the altar were barren, so it wasn't even possible to sneak up there. And as the fairy spoke before, the news of the treasure being found will be spread all around. Even if they wanted to exchange the treasure for rewards, they will only get suppressed by the people who would rush their way there. Since they needed to go to the altar where the fairy is in order to exchange the treasure for the reward. Or they might have everything stolen even if they got there safely and exchanged the treasure for the rewards. There was no rule saying that every artifact had to be distributed evenly, even if they chose to exchange for 50 of them. If they steal it all, then nothing is left in their hands. Chalman spoke out as he looked at the people mumbling about. Do you all understand? This is a tactic that can only be accomplished if we work together, but if we stay like this as the weaker ones, then we may all just die. Though it's important to find the treasure, we must take into account of the aftermath after finding the treasure. They needed to go through 3 stages in order to survive in this place. Obtain the treasure. Get the treasure to the altar and exchange it for the reward. Take the reward and walk out. The requirements were already set. Battle strength. If your battle strength is weak, then you would lose your head even before you got to the altar where the fairy was. and even if you were able to get to the altar safely, you won't be able to choose the number of the reward, since people would be charging at them in order to take the limited rewards from all around. There's no way that those guys will let them go, since they will just die if they don't acquire those. In order for the people with low battle powers to survive, they needed to exchange it for 50 of Curatan's bludgeon to fit the number of people, and spread it all around. No, you can still die with that if you are unlucky, since there was no guarantee that each person will get one of the 50 Curatan's bludgeons. If you are weak, then you might just die from the acts of evil people, since they can steal it for fun and go out with it. But if your battle power is sufficient, there wasn't even a need to look for the treasure, since they can just steal it from the guys who come to the altar in the center after finding it. The aftermath of them finding the treasure was more important for them to survive. Chalman raised his spirits as he saw the people get shaken and continued to speak. Of course, everyone needs to combine their strengths in order to find the treasure, but does everyone need to try hard to find the treasure? It's hard for us to get through 2 dungeons in a day, but the teams we saw earlier can even clear 4 in a day, though casualties may increase. Everyone nodded, since those people were at a different level from them. It was possible for them to clear 4 in a day if they hurried, though casualties will happen one by one. Chalman nodded as he spoke. Those guys will clear the Protector's dungeons much faster than us. What do you think those guys will do after they accomplish their quota? Of course they will. Everyone's expressions turned solemn. They didn't have any leisure, but those strong guys had to leisure to even hunt. Their gaps will increase even more. It isn't the time for us to search fervently. We just need to pray that one of the 2 strongest households don't find it fast, since only then would they hurry and search for the treasure by sacrificing bits of their strengths at a time. And during that time, we must get stronger, in order to prepare for the aftermath of them finding the treasure. They were weak. It would just become even more dangerous for them if they find the treasure like this. But if they were to do the following, then the distance in the gap will become shorter, which means that they will be able to ensure their own safety to some point even after they find the treasure. But isn't there a possibility for them to chase us down and vent their anger on us? Though the island was wide, they could still find each other if they set their minds to it. Though they won't meet each other while they fight. If there isn't any announcements of dungeons being cleared, then they will come and find them. Chalman shook his head as he spoke. How would they know who did and who didn't when there's 5 teams? Everyone nodded. If they lie and act normally, then they would be able to get through it. And by the time they find out and come to us, we'll have become quite formidable as well. If we clash, then they also would get injuries and won't be able to clear the dungeons of the Protectors. Would they be able to fight us in such a situation? Everyone's expressions turned cold. Correct. It was not time for them to let their guards down. The aftermath of finding the treasure was more important than actually finding it. If they have weak battle powers, then they won't be able to escape their fate of their game being stolen after their hunt. The point was that it didn't matter who tried harder. It was who is stronger. The people who had heard Chalman's words nodded with a frozen expression, and then changed their direction towards the hunting grounds from the direction to the dungeon. Chalman also clenched his teeth as he advanced forward. I must survive in order to find Suhi. He couldn't let his life be in the hands of the strong. There will be no point of shouting about for fairness when you didn't have the strength to even ensure your own rights. Chalman slowly walked forward with clenched teeth. Kujujuduk. Who? Hansu stretched his body as he looked at the back of the Protector that he had smashed. It's more convenient to move about alone, as I thought. His battle power will decrease if he were to act with others, because he won't be able to release his transformation. Another Protector has died. The treasure hasn't been found, but be strong. The fairy's voice resonated all around as Hansu touched the marble he had attained after killing the Protector. It's a blank as I expected. A marble which did not give off light. But this was actually more important for Hansu than the actual treasure. As Hansu touched it, it got absorbed like a rune into his left wrist and turned into a symbol. It's the fourth one. If this pace was to continue, then collecting 32 in 2 weeks wouldn't be hard, since he will be able to get through about 4 in a day if he didn't go overboard. But on the other hand, it was hard for him to do more than 4, since going overboard meant that the strength he had remaining to use the next day will decrease. They might really not be able to find the treasure if the others don't crush through the dungeons well. Then it'll be a massacre. 1 day had passed. Logically speaking, 14 fireworks should have been made combined with his, since they had decided that they will do 2 per 5 teams for 10. But the actual number was only 10, which meant that somebody didn't accomplish their quota. And the time between each firework was getting longer and longer, which meant that they were getting lazier. They are definitely being lazier and have more leisure since 10 was being filled up without them hunting for themselves. These actions are obvious. This place would be very easy to clear as 50 people of a clan, but getting massacred wasn't that hard when 50 different people with different thoughts and strengths gathered. It's time for me to move. Solving the situation in this place was actually quite simple. It didn't matter whether there was an underling of the Dark Lords or not. He just needed to turn into his real self and crush them all. He was more specialized in catching people than beasts anyway. The beasts could take quite a hit, but the people here will puke out blood just from the dagger he threw, because of their limited health. There was no way for the people here to beat him who had the 7-stripe cape and the Decratos set. Then he would tell them to kill the protectors of their quota. Then he just needed to take the treasure to the altar from whoever found it, and that'll be the end of it. But then the earring is a little bit regrettable. He hadn't transformed to kill off a few tadpoles, and there was no problem even if he didn't release his transformation, since he had already found someone to act on his behalf a long time ago. Hansu disappeared after activating Arankel's bracelet. Chapter 47, Tower 6. These damnable bastards. It seems like they aren't doing this properly. Lord Jumi grinded her teeth. One of the clansmen below sighed as he heard those words and spoke. Isn't it easier if you just take them into the clan from the start? Why don't you take clansmen around with you? Jumi frowned as she spoke. It's already tedious for me to bring you guys along. No, this psychic power doesn't fit me from the start. Godamnit, why did something like this appear? The clansmen shook their head as they saw Jumi say such things about her psychic power that others were dying of jealousy from. Do you know how shitty it feels when you gain a connection to a random person and then have him die? It might be different for somebody who isn't close or something. And I hate the most the fact that I can tell somebody to fight instead of me in times of danger. The 9 of you is too much already. Damn it, I'll only recruit strong ones from now on. She's really a different kind. They clicked their tongue while looking at Jumi, but nodded their heads at the same time. Well, with those battle powers, it was okay for her to feel as if they were annoyances. They didn't know what the hell she had picked up below, but she was really strong. Jumi was a lord, but she definitely wasn't like Cao Cao or Liu Bei. She felt more like Lu Bu. The clansmen here were strong, but they would all get pummeled until they turned into rice cakes even if they were to all fight her. It isn't that her skills, runes or artifacts are out of the ordinary or something. Of course, she was above average compared to ordinary adventures. But Jumi's battle power couldn't be explained with just that, since she had mixed up everything above amazingly and melted it down to one battle style. They wouldn't be able to show 1/3 the strength of Jumi, even if they had the same things. But what are you going to do? They're still trying to do the chicken game, and if they continue to hunt like that, then they will really become formidable. The other dangerous 10 also get on my nerves as well. Tusk, damnable guys, we should have set the mood in the beginning. Jumi clicked her tongue. since she couldn't do anything about getting angry despite her understanding the reason behind it. If this were to continue, then they would need to go kill 3 to 4 protectors a day. And this would only bring them harm. If the others hunt and raise their strength fervently in that time period, then the gap between them will become immeasurably closer. My head hurts. There's something that bothers me too. This is why, even though she foresaw something like this would be happening, at the moment she brought her clan out fast as if she was fleeing from something. At that moment, the air sliced apart as somebody came out of thin air. Everyone flinched, since they didn't even realize that someone had come out. "You bastard, who are you?" The clansmen shouted coldly as they held up their blades. Hansu, who had come out of thin air and had the look of Changyi, smiled as he spoke. "Nothing much, I'm just here with a proposal." "Proposal?" Hansu shrugged his shoulders. "It's a really good proposal on your part too. You guys just need to listen to me. I'll let all of you escape this island alive." Then Hansu explained what he was going to make them do. Things he would have done himself if he had the power. One of the clansmen spoke quietly with a helpless expression. Did he lose all notions of fear or something? It seemed like he was pretty talented, since they couldn't spot his camouflage. But it didn't seem like he could maintain that during a fight. And it felt like he could kill 1 to 2 of them, but that was his limit. What would such a guy have as his basis for him to act about so? Is he trying to get a sneak attack? They had never seen somebody trying to act as a captain just by relying on a simple sneak attack from behind. But Hansu just smiled. It would be simple if he were to just release his transformation and show them, but then some trails will be left behind. But there's still a simple solution without going to such an extent, since he had come here from the start because of that. Well, if it doesn't work, then I'll stop the transformation for a moment. His goal was not being found out by the underling of the Dark Mad Lord anyway. And these guys are of the same clan, so the chances of the Dark Mad Lord's forces being mixed in here is none. "Not you, I'm talking to your lord. Let's have a talk with me, the lady over there." Hansu looked at Jumi, who was standing quietly behind the clansman as he spoke. 6th sense stat. I don't know where she had attained such a valuable thing, but she should be able to see it somewhat. He had understood somewhat since she had been looking all around her at the surroundings ever since he was here. 6th sense. It was a different stat from perception, not part of the 8 general stats. Perception increased the 5 senses one had, but the 6th sense was basically the same as a psychic power. It was something he had given up looking for, because it was too hard to find in the tutorial area. Jumi looked at Hansu in cold sweat. Fuck, that was the thing. Jumi grinded her teeth, since she finally understood why he felt the chill run down the spine since a while ago. A 6th sense stat which she had attained at the beginning. It raised a person's battle power beyond the limits, since it allowed one to sense things others could not sense. And something was moving about behind Hansu's back in her eyes. To come up here with something like that, fuck. She knew instinctively. That was just a shell. There is something much more fearsome hiding beneath it. She didn't know what that thing was, but if that thing showed itself and decided to kill them all, then they will all die. Jumi breathed in and out and then spoke. Can't you just do it alone with such abilities? She didn't know what he was hiding, but it was extremely dangerous. With that much, he didn't need them. He just needed to go out and sweep them all under him. And just kill them if they didn't listen. Hansu smiled at those words. Everyone has circumstances. I need someone to fight instead of me, since I can't get found out yet. Jumi sighed and then spoke to Hansu. Even we can't beat all 40 of them. It seems like you won't be fighting. What are you planning? If such a thing was possible, then they would have fought at the beginning already. What's the problem? There are weaker ones roaming about in groups of 10. Beat up all the weaker ones separately and get them into your clan. He hadn't acted out because of this until now, since it'll become more convenient if they spread out. One day, should be enough for them to get separated enough to leave a lord in leisure behind to travel in groups of 10 separately. Symbols were gained from the agreement of both sides, but he had never seen anybody who had not agreed with a blade up against up throat before. I don't know what you don't like about it, but put them into the clan for now, and do whatever you want with them afterwards. Though there's 10 of them who are a bit dangerous, I wonder if they'll act out if there's 40 of you guys. He's a bit annoying, shall I have a go at him? But Jiumi shook her head. Her sixth sense had saved her too many times for her to do so. And that sixth sense was warning her clearly to listen. Let's go. Everyone nodded as they headed somewhere. Hansu smiled as he saw this. That's done. This is easy for them to get massacred if all 50 are separated, but at the time same, it was easy to clear if all 50 combined. They just needed to make the clan, kill the protectors in leisure, and attain the treasure. I can see the ending coming around. If he gains the Philosopher's Stone here, then he has gained everything necessary to go in the dungeon. Then only one stage is left. The 2 weeks will go by fast. Hansu laughed as he disappeared in order to kill the protectors as well. It seems the time has come for us to separate. Jiumi made a tired expression as she looked at the people around her. Almost 50 people. They were mostly her clansmen now. I'm tired. It was even more tiring because she was trying to not get any of them die due to that useless connection. Though some weren't part of her clan. The 4 over there. Jiumi looked at the 4, who were of different quality in the corner. Lord couldn't give symbols to other lords. And lords could not give symbols to people who had already gained symbols from a different clan. Which meant that if the giving of the symbol didn't work then, it would mean that that person was a lord or part of a clan. And because of this, these 4 caught the eyes. Well, there's nothing really special about them. Our clan has 84 people, but the room they entered had 80 as the limit, so we could only separate from the lord. It wasn't that they all believed their excuses. But what was the point when they were going to separate anyway? She just needed to take care of her own clan. Let's all go our own ways. Jiumi changed the treasure into 50 Curatan's bludgeons, gave it to each and everyone one by one, and then ordered them to suicide. Crack. Blood. Yumi's psychic power is strong enough to order them to suicide. Everyone else other than her original clansmen had their symbols broken as soon as she gave the order. And at the same time they, who had escaped from the clan, all looked fiercely at each other, but then ran towards the exist after giving up. Since there was no need to fight after having guaranteed their safety. Well, this is a good end from one point of view. Though things had progressed half forcibly, everyone had survived as the result. Since they had repeated the hunt for protectors of the dungeons faithfully under the order of the clan lord. As the people who were thinking this, and that made their way to the exit, a giant door in the space that trapped them opened with a rumbling noise. And a slightly different view from before had appeared in front of them. Maze. Many separate paths had appeared in front of their eyes. And the fairy appeared in front of their eyes. Everyone here has survived. Hee. Congratulations. You will now get sent to the starting point of the 3rd floor. There's nothing hard, you just need to follow the path. If you follow the crossroads, you will arrive at one of hundreds of starting points. You can group up and follow your friends who arrived earlier or go separately when you get there. Everyone shrugged their shoulders as they disappeared into the paths. Though it wasn't like being moved into a room, it didn't really matter. Jiumi looked at Changyi with a suspicious expression, but then shook her head as she took her clansmen into one of the numerous paths. Shall I go too? It didn't seem like the 4 there would move before he did. Hansu, who had the appearance of Changyi, smirked as he walked towards the starting point. And after a while, he activated Arinkle's bracelet and hid himself completely. Then he very carefully returned to the starting point. As he expected, these 4, who had said they were part of the other clan, were standing in the same position, despite the others leaving one by one. When are they going to move? Hurry up and move." Hansu looked at them with great patience. And soon, when everyone else had disappeared, they seemed to have received orders from somewhere as they started to ruthlessly go through the paths. Hansu smiled as he saw them. "Hurry and guide me to your captain." Even if he found them painstakingly and then kill them off one by one, the Lord will slowly regenerate his strength as well. There was only one solution to this tedious situation: to cut off the Lord's neck in a single strike. But he had no way of knowing where this guy was. First and second floor were impossible, and the only possible third floor still had a few hundred starting points. It was not possible to search through each and every one of them. But at a single time, he had a single chance. A chance which appears when the special structure of the tower and the dangers of the third floor combines. If I miss that time, then it will really be hard to catch him. If that happens, then I'll just gain everything we discussed and prepare first, and then kill him at the very end after clearing the dungeon. If the dark mad lord had arrived to the third floor and had seen the environment of this place, then he could only gather all of his clansmen to a single spot. The third floor was the place where they let them taste the harsh reality of the other world. It was not somewhere where tricks worked. Since his head was good, he had probably realized that he had to gather his clansmen in order for him to act around in such a place. And the people in front of him will guide him to the dark mad lord, who could be in one of the hundreds of starting points. If Hansu had revealed his identity here, then that cautious guy would have split up all his clansmen to other places. Since if that guy had seen the third floor, he would want to only use his own forces and prevent any possible mishaps from happening in order to get through the third floor. But Hansu himself had to meet him, and that was where the earring came into play. It's the final stage. He had gained everything he needed, with the Philosopher's Stone being the last. The only thing he needed now was some fancy gear and plenty of runes. He would have actually had to run around the whole tower according to the original plan, since it'll be hard for oneself to have a full setting of gear and runes. But there was a way for him to solve it very simply. Since the people who have been running around the whole tower for him will gather in a single place. People who would have such an amount that even he wouldn't be able to gather alone. "Dark Mad Lord, let's see your face, it's been a while." And once he finishes them off, then all the preparations are complete for entering the final dungeon. The final stage of the preparation wasn't some beast. It was the Dark Mad Lord himself. I'll use all my strength, because in that place only he and they exist. Since there was no way the Dark Mad Lord would let random people who started at the same place as him alive. He could use all his strength since rumors won't be spreading anyway. Hansu slowly disappeared into the darkness as he followed the others. And then somebody appeared in the place where Hansu disappeared. "You really want to follow?" One of the clansmen looked at Jumi as they shook their head. To pretend to go up the road in order to follow him. And how the hell did she even find him? Is it that sixth sense thing? Jumi smirked as she nodded. Aren't you even bit curious as to what kind of thoughts he has? Just with that alone? Well, we'll find out when we get there. And if the path we were following and this is the same anyway, then there's nothing bad about going this way. And then Jumi followed the pathway towards the place that the sixth sense was pointing to, where the dangerous aura was radiating from. Chapter 48, Tower 7. It's been a while. Hansu mumbled quietly as he watched the flaming environment around him. The third floor, which imitated the red zone. They called it the red zone because it used red energy. But there were other reasons as well. An eternally blazing world that had received the punishment of the gods. And that was why it was called the red zone. Irvyang, this was your world, huh? He didn't know back then. Even right before the invasion of the abyss. We were just frogs in a well. But he, after getting through the abyss, knew now. How the other world, which was comprised of 7 colored zones, was structured. If such a thing called a god existed then, it was really a vicious thing. Humanity was a very lucky race if you take into account what happened to Irving's race, who were space-time travelers. Hansu shook his head. It's not time to get emotional. This was just a fake which copied the red zone. It didn't even have half of the dangers. Shall I go? This guy will probably be stuck at the cross. He just needed to end him there. Hansu continued his steps through the flaming landscape. It's amazing. Everyone who was advancing faithfully under the orders of Wenjiang swirled their tongues around. Everything in their surroundings was burning. The strange-looking buildings which belonged to some other race were blazing, and numerous beasts were moving between the buildings without end. Damn, all of the area on the third floor shouldn't be like this, right? That was not even reasonable. It wasn't to the point where they were getting burned to death, but the non-stop heat kept attacking their throats and lungs. And the beasts that charged at them were so strong that even his clansmen were barely blocking them. Due to the whole environment burning, there wasn't any water to drink either. One of two things will happen at this rate. Either die from the beasts or die from dehydration. The world outside the tutorial is always like this. The fairy had told them that the third floor was like a glimpse of the world outside of the tutorial. And added something else too. Once you reach that point, we don't really interfere. At first he was really relieved, since even he wasn't comfortable with the fairy who brought evil rules endlessly. But he was slowly realizing something. It's not like it's not interfering, but more like it doesn't need to interfere. If it was such a harsh environment to the point where they didn't need to interfere, then they simply wouldn't, since they will die by themselves. Wenjiang, who had been advancing through the dried-up landscape, shook his head. There's no way. There was no way that they would leave them all to die. Wenjiang was confident. The strongest power in all of the tower was him. If a power like his was suffering this much, then all of the others might just die out. There was no way that they would have set the difficulty so. Kyujujuduk. First advance forward. Wenjiang solidified his thoughts as he advanced. And soon a giant cross appeared in his view. What is that? Isn't it pretty? The fairy, which had appeared without anyone noticing, babbled. Wenjiang slightly frowned at those words. It was a disgusting-looking cross, even at a single glance. And on that cross, human faces were coming out and going back into it non-stop, like people who were trapped within a giant cloth. And then Wenjiang rubbed his eyes after seeing an extremely familiar face. The fairy smiled as it spoke. Can you see some familiar faces? Wenjiang ignored the fairy's words as he inspected the cross after walking closer to it, and then made an expression of fear. Is this cross? I don't know what you're thinking about, but shall we say it's right? Correct. All the information of those who died in the tutorial are in there. Oh my, 2 were just added. Wenjiang slightly closed the gaps of his eyes. But what is the meaning of this? He knew that it was definitely disgusting. But what did this mean to them? Reflect our actions while looking at the dead. The fairy shook its head. The cross will look very, very pretty after you hear my words. That is the cross of reincarnation. You can revive someone of those who participated in the tutorial who had died. Wenjiang made an expression of fright. They did look like beings close to gods. But for them to be able to affect those who had already died. What is this nonsense? Can you guys even control the dead? The fairy smirked. That's a bit too hard at our level. It's just a copy that we brought on the way here. A copy? Yes, we made a copy of all of you when you came here and saved it within that cross. And that cross uses that as the base to create a copy. While Wenjiang's eyes were flickering, the fairy made a smile, as if it knew that would happen, and spoke. Though it's a copy, their strength and memory will be the same as the real one before they came to this side. Wildn't this be amazing if it's a loved one? It can revive the dead. Wenjiang's hands trembled. Really? Wan Jiang's memories rewinded at an extreme speed. The reason why he had came to despise other lords. This was all because of that guy he had met in the start. Actually, there was somebody else who had manifested the power of a lord before Wan Jiang in the first tutorial area. And that guy had taken control of his door with the symbol and played around with her, then killed her by using her as a shield during a dangerous moment. How much he had despaired over this. He had created a much bigger power after he had manifested his power as a lord, since his psychic power was much greater than that guy's. And he thought, after ripping that guy to shreds, that the reason why he was given this psychic power was a sign from the heavens to rip apart all those other lords. And one more thing. He needed a lot of strength. Why? Since his son, who went missing 5 years before him, might be alive. He needed much more strength than he has now in order to find him, since his son would be much further ahead than him if he was alive. He couldn't catch up the 5-year gap to his son with some average amount of power. He basically needed strength to plow through and advance forward. It didn't matter to him if his actions were something that would cause him to get cursed by others, since the ones who curse him aren't the ones who would find his son for him. Everything was playing out very well. But for such a thing to happen to him, Wan Jiang touched the cross with trembling hands. As soon as his hands touched it, thousands of people who had died in the tutorial appeared in front of his eyes. And many of those who had died by his clans existed as well. But that didn't matter, since his only interest was his daughter. While he was flipping through the catalog, his daughter Ahi came into his eyes. ALLA! Wan Jiang shed tears of joy. He could revive Ahi, without any memories of pain, with the body and memory before she had come here. Though her body would be weak, that did not matter. He just needed to protect her. Thank you, God, thank you. Wan Jiang asked the fairy in a hurry. How can I revive them? The fairy smirked as it spoke. Simple, just put someone in here. The fairy pointed towards the bottom of the giant cross. A deep hole that looked like a grave. What? You need ingredients in order to make something new. Put someone else in for the person coming out. It's pretty simple that way. Wan Jiang hurriedly looked around. He just needed to put the weakest one in. Then there will be no problems. At his orders, a guy who had been panting from an injury slowly dragged his body and walked towards the hole beneath the cross. While Wan Jiang was rejoicing at that sight, sounds of the fairy clicking its tongue were heard. No, can't do that. You can't do that. You can't use a clansman. It becomes too easy then. We didn't want to see something like that. You can't use tricks. What do you want? Wan Jiang screamed out unknowingly. The fairy smiled coyly as it spoke. It's not that hard. You just need to put someone else who isn't part of your clan in here. Then your daughter lives too. How good is it? Hey. It's really chaotic in other places about now, but it's a problem here because it's all one clan. Another one added to the cross. Wan Jiang despaired at these words. How would he find somebody in his deserted land? Wan Jiang asked the fairy just in case. Damn, is there another chance like this in the future? He didn't believe that only they will be on the path from now on. If they meet others, then they could just catch them, then revive Ahi after inserting them into the cross they will find later. The fairy shook its head. No, this is the end of the privilege. Chances don't come that easily, right? As we see it, it's not fun when people have leisure. You need to be a bit of a crisis. If you leave after visiting this place once, then you can't use it again. God damn it. Wan Jiang spat out a scream of despair. They were already behind, because they had to gather all their clansmen who were spread all around. The people who had started off were probably going through some other path somewhere else. And what would a person with some basic sense think when they see the view of the 3rd floor? Would they go around some roundabout way and group up with other people in some other starting point? Or would they think to go through his hell-like place by themselves? And they couldn't wait forever in this place. since they couldn't get anything to eat or drink in these blazing plains. He couldn't send out his clansmen when he didn't know what could happen from now on. But then Wonjeong's expression turned cold. Maybe. He didn't know what was ahead, but he had somewhat organized on the way here from the starting point. If he sends some clansmen to wait in the starting point, then some random guys might pop out. And then he just needed to catch them before they went into other paths. At that moment, one of his clansmen shouted loudly, "Lord, somebody is coming this way over there." What? Wonjeong opened his eyes wide and looked towards the starting point. And he could see a person walking towards them from the starting point. How could this be? Thank you, O God. Wonjeong, who wasn't even religious, prayed to God. No, there was no way such a thing would happen if there was no God. God had given him the power to find his son and a chance to revive his daughter. If God isn't looking after him, then what was this? Soon Wonjeong's mind, which was filled with glee, calmed down. That guy couldn't run away after seeing this place. Definitely not. He had to catch him, no matter what, and throw him under the grave. Since that was the only way to save his daughter. I don't know who you are, but thank you. Catch him. As soon as his order came down, his clansmen charged towards the man walking towards them from afar. Hansu quietly mumbled inwardly as he looked at the people charging at him. Dark Mad Lord, first-rate Dark Lord. The sins he had caused were too many to list. Of course, this was all a thing of the past. His situation he knew too well, since he had heard all of his screams of despair before he died. He knew why he hated lords, why he tried to increase his strength crazily, and how he had become a first-rate Dark Lord. He had to leave behind his daughter here because he couldn't find some other non-clansman here. And he, who had been enraged by this, caused a massacre in the tutorial due to the urgent thoughts of him having to find his one remaining son. He had done so until now, but in greater amounts from this point onwards. And he had caught up the gap of 5 years, but went crazy after finding out that his son had died, and then flipped the other world upside down. As if he was trying to relieve the rage against the world, which had killed his son and daughter, by venting it on the inhabitants of the world. His circumstances were regrettable, but it could not excuse him for the things he had done so far. But you won't feel unfair from this, since you will get to revive your daughter if you win here. He had come to the Dark Mad Lord, and the Dark Mad Lord had come to kill him. It wouldn't be bad for him, since if the Dark Mad Lord won in this fight, he would be able to use him as a sacrifice to revive his daughter. That was all he needed. And soon his justice and judgment of Dekratos exploded out with his body as the center. Chapter 49, 3 Gateways 1. Kyujujudug. The chain scythe flew around with Hansu as the center non-stop. And at the same time the dagger ripped through the air. Kuke. Got him nit. Wonjeong grinded his teeth as he heard the screams of his clansmen that came from every direction. Got him nit, he's too fast. He knew who he was up against after the fight began. The guy who had messed up their plans as a whole at Central Island. He wondered why the guy who he had thought went to a different island was here, but decided that it didn't matter. Since if his skills were the same as when he saw him then, it wouldn't be hard to catch him with his clansmen. Why would he have set up the net on the path up from Central Island if he thought that a full frontal clash was not possible? He had prepared it because he was confident in winning. And the biggest reason, that guy for some reason did not use any skills. And that was why he thought that he could win in a head-on battle. And their gears weren't even comparable to others. They also had increased their battle strength by consuming other adventurers climbing the tower. Nothing much to say about their teamwork too. But this was all a huge miscalculation. Why did he go to different island if he was that strong? There was nobody to stop them when their clan swung their sword. Nothing much to say about the guys who were caught off guard since they worked from the dark. But that was simply arrogance. Thinking about it, it had only been 2 months since they got here. It just didn't feel that short because they had experienced a lot. No matter how many people they sliced apart for 2 months, they were still humans. On the other hand, if there was a thing called a human butcher, he was sure that that guy was him. It felt like he had gone through countless years of work where he killed people, keeping distant with as much higher stats as the bases, keeping an eye on the whole battlefield, and moving in directions where he wouldn't get surrounded. It had naturally turned into a structure where they all chased his back. And then he would ruthlessly slice apart those who chase him with his chain scythe and his dagger. It wasn't that his attacks were weak even if he threw them from afar. There wasn't a single case where his attacks did not hit a fatal location, an attack which flew into a spot of sure kill. And because they couldn't not defend, the gap they barely closed widened while they defended. Their artifacts were unique and strong ones as well, but his scythe and dagger were so strong that every time they clashed weapons, their weapons would break along with their bones. Got him knit. It was hard to hold him down even if they poured on skills because his resistances were high, and every time they used a decisive skill, the skill would break as a light shone from his right hand. Got him knit. Will we be able to catch him before his stamina runs out? But Wonjiang didn't really see much hope. The time when the most amount of stamina is consumed is when someone goes through attacks as well as defending actions. But he was barely defending and only pouring out attacks. He didn't know much, but if his stamina was at the same level as his strength or perception, then those movements won't stop until all of them got ripped apart. Kyujudug. Ualaka. Those with charging skills hold him down first. There were a few who could stick close by him. Clansmen who had charging skills. Wonjiang had regarded this skill very highly and had distributed this skill to his clansmen who had high defense and resistances. They were basically charging warriors. They had high defenses and resistances to go against their weapons and rip the enemy apart after getting close to the enemy with their defensive artifacts. He had 20 of these guys. If we can just tie him down, then we can kill him. It wasn't that blades did not work against him, since he was bleeding from the occasional blades that got to him, which means that they could kill him as long as they can surround him and hold him down. Got him knit. He would have died if he had come up through the portal. But these were meaningless complaints. The only thing he could trust in was them. Maybe it was due to the fact that he had raised them with great care, but the charging warriors were going through the endless chain scythe and dagger and had gotten quite close to Hansu. Dai. Chwag. A blade was ruthlessly getting close to Hansu. But Hansu already had every information about this guy in his head. Though it was hard to read the rune stats of a leisurely guy, he could clearly read the stats of someone who was fighting with all their strength. The images endlessly came one after another, until the enemy's next movement was drawn in his head. Hansu followed those movements as he slashed at the side of that guy's sword with his dagger. Kyujudug. His strength was not average, and Hansu's hand, which held the dagger that deflected the sword, trembled as it started to bleed. And the attack which Hansu had deflected sliced into his own shoulder. Even if you can completely dodge or defend against an attack, you shouldn't do so. Since if you focus on defending or dodging the attacks of those who stick close to you, you will just get slowed down. And then you will just get surrounded by the enemies who are charging at you. Then you just die. Even if he allowed them to attack, he could not let them close the gap. Kyujudug. The attack bore deep into his shoulder as it started to bleed. But he backed off quickly even in such a situation and strongly pulled on the chain scythe. And I'm not really losing out either. Cool. Hansu held the chain scythe, which had cut through the guy's artery, and swung the chain scythe all around him again as he started to repeat the tedious work. Of course, there were a few things he didn't forget to do. First, absorbing all the runes that were dropped as well as using the dropped artifacts for defense and offense. Second, slashing the justice of Dekratos from time to time at Wonjiang while mid-battle. His core was being a lord. And if Wonjeong had any form of survival instinct, he will pull some forces towards him in order to defend against the daggers that flew to him. And of course, when the clansmen who should be attacking fall back to defend him, he gets a bit of a breather. I guess I cannot let the clansmen live. The guys who were under orders charged in like zealots. Wonjeong was ordering his clansmen even more ruthlessly, as his life was starting to get threatened, so that they would bite if their arms were cut off and act as a meat shield if their necks were cut off. He was also losing health as well. There was no space for him to go easy. Dark Mad Lord, let's stop here this time. Hansu made a cold expression as he tore through the Dark Mad Lord's clansmen at an intensified rate. Got him nit, got him nit. Wonjeong made a soulless expression at his massacred clansmen, and then shouted at Hansu while grinding his teeth. You bastard, what do you have against me to the point where you would go this far? He didn't know back then. But he knew now that this guy was going after him ever since Central Island. He didn't know how Hansu had known of his existence, but he was definitely moving around while targeting him. And he could not understand this. You bitch, why are you doing this to me when I haven't done anything wrong to you? Huh, we aren't like sworn enemies or something. Why are you chasing me this far? What sin have I committed? Is it because I killed people? Huh, is that it? Or because I didn't follow the rules that you spread around? He could have saved his daughter if he had a little more time. And he could have found his missing son with this strength. But all of this had been blocked off because of this one guy. And he could only think of one thing: the uncanny rules that he heard from Gukti. This damnable guy, what is he for him to set such rules at us? Hansu shook his head at those words. I'm not killing you because you broke the rules. He wasn't killing them because they broke the rules. It didn't make sense to apply these rules to those who didn't want to be with him from the start. This was the same thing as getting hold of an American and imposing Korean rules to them. In these kind of cases, you could solve it by splitting up like T-Soon did in the past. He also didn't have the leisure to chase them all down and kill them off because they broke the rules. Setting up the rules is after uniting everyone. It was a future plan, and he had to find a different method to solve that. How would he govern over all those people? Then why are you? Wonjeong became absent-minded at the unexpected answer. Hansu muttered quietly. You guys are just stepping stones. There were a few things that he needed to do in his plans. If his plans were only uniting all of humanity, why would he have come? Urs or Chaldean would have come instead. There were a few things he needed to accomplish in order to solve the prohibited region, and this stood far above anything else. Even if he had to kill off everyone in the tutorial area in order to accomplish his set plans, then he would have done so. He didn't think that small sacrifices for bigger things were right, but he didn't hesitate if it was needed. But because they didn't want this, they had set up a plan which had the least amount of casualties. But the thing was, even if they tried to reduce the amount of casualties, there were occasions where casualties were needed to catch up to their difficult goals. And because of this, they reduced the targets who would be sacrificed, deciding who had to die in order for them to get to the next stage. The guys who would have no other choice than to die even if they left them alone. Or those who had the possibility of causing the most amount of damage to humanity or committed the most sins. Those who would have their death called for by others when they found out later. This occasion of 3 gateways was like that too. No matter how much we calculate, you can't get to the level of clearing the dungeon just by hunting. Since that dark mad lord exists, we will use him. Don't go easy on him. Receiving orders doesn't matter. Does the number of people who die by his hands change? It hadn't been 2 months yet, and the time that they had calculated at which he would go into the final dungeon still had a month left. No, just like how Chaldean said, it wouldn't be possible for him to get to the level of clearing the dungeon even if he was to hunt for a month. And because of this, he needed a stepping stone to get into the 3 gateways, and these guys were just chosen to become those stepping stones. In conclusion, he hadn't come here to give them judgment because they had broken the rules. They weren't dying because he was right and they were wrong. Maybe that's a bit too far. Since the number of people who have died in these guys, hands won't change. Don't think about it too much. Isn't it easier to think that you tried to kill me and we clashed because of that? Truthfully speaking, I think that's enough of a reason. You were just running towards your own goal and I the same. We just clashed while doing so, and the one who got crushed was you this time. You have crushed others so well up to this point. Why are you making an expression like you're suffering an injustice? Won Jiang made a lethargic expression at those words. This guy is just like me. He had been fooled. He had thought that when he tried to lead everyone in Central Island, that was his true character. He thought that he was like a hero who was advancing forward in the world which was collapsing. But that wasn't it. That was just the image which he was holding up. This was his true character. He was just like himself. Like how he could kill countless number of people in order to achieve his goals, that guy could also do that with no hesitation. Except he was much thorough than himself. Hansu suddenly thought of Kangti's words as he looked at Won Jiang. Wow, if everything goes according to the plan, then you would become an amazing hero. You don't become a hero by catching evildoers. No, listen. I'm saying that you can become an amazing person of superiority. If you do things properly, then wouldn't you look like an awesome leader from the outside? Girls will be falling all over you too. It should be me who goes. You definitely cannot go. Won Jiang made a focusless expression, but then sighed as he realized that this was the end. Since his sanity had come back after his death got guaranteed. Well, this might have been said already when I started killing people. He had constantly killed people as he got stronger, with the sole reason of finding his son. And at the same time he thought of this. Because he was strong, he could treat others as sacrificial lambs. And this world did not have any rules or society to stop that, but rather encouraged him. And this was the result of that. I could eventually be stepped on or eaten by somebody else like this too. From a point of view, this insecurity had pushed him farther than his desire to find his son. It came much faster than I had thought. Won Jiang sighed deeply as he spoke while looking at Hansu. You won't save my daughter even if I asked you. He could only save his daughter if he were to put in a normal human being. It didn't seem like that guy would do something like that. And when Hansu shook his head as he expected, he sighed as he spoke his last words. If you find my son, please look after him, though it's a little bit too much to ask when you are trying to kill me. Hansu shook his head as he spoke at Won Jiang, who was explaining his son's characteristics. There's no need for that. But if my plans work out well, his fate may be changed. Godamnit, what are you talking about until the end? Then Hansu's dagger aggressively sliced past Won Jiang's neck. Hansu looked at the dead dark mad lord with a complex look, and then got up while shaking his head. Just do some cleanup and move out. There wasn't much time. Hansu looked around at the 100+ corpses around him, and then looked towards the starting location where he had come from. HNNG, damn, when can we go? Jumi, who had been standing at the starting point with her clansmen, grinded her teeth. While they were chasing him, they were caught by him when he suddenly changed his path and rushed towards them. The fact that they stuck too close, because she was afraid of losing him, was the mistake. Damn it, did he expect 1 or 2 people to follow him from the start? As soon as Changyi saw them, he spoke out. Good, Kyuhu, set up a barricade here so nobody else can go past here. Why should we? I will forgive you for following me if you do that. Block them well. She had followed out of curiosity, but that curiosity did not win over her fear. Since it felt like an accident may happen if she didn't listen. It had been over half a day of waiting here. Damn it, should I just go? But before Jumi finished her thoughts, a blood-covered Changyi was walking over from afar. What did you do? Hansu, who had the appearance of Changyi, looked over at Jumi with a cold expression and then nodded his head. She really didn't follow. If she had followed him to where he had fought, then those traces couldn't be hidden, since there would be traces of the soot that filled up the whole of the third floor. Then it's okay, since she wouldn't be able to figure it out even if she went. It's better to not know. You've done well, so go on your way now. As soon as he finished those words, Chung-yi disappeared into the paths. And then Jumi narrowed her eyes. That's towards the outskirts of the tower. Jumi made a strange expression, but then shook her head. She had been stuck here for too long anyway. It seemed like he wanted to hide something, but then it might really become dangerous once she tried to pry into it. It doesn't seem like he's the type that would let the person who figured the thing he tried so hard to hide go. She was curious, but she could not distinguish between fire and water. If he had stopped them from following him, it meant that he didn't want to show them anything, but if he were to chase them down while they pried into it. I don't even want to think about it. Stop thinking about it. Stop thinking about it. There were things that she needed to keep as a secret even if she knew about them. Jumi took her clansmen as she proceeded forward at a very fast pace. And after a while, a giant cross could be seen. Her sixth sense had told her instinctively that something happened here. But her only clue was her sixth sense. He had cleaned up things so well that nobody would have known that anything happened without the sixth sense. Well, it's nothing I need to know about. While Jumi was trying hard to suppress her curiosity, the fairy appeared in the sky again. Oh my, people came again. Then shall I start the explanation about this cross right? Oh no, it increased by 3 more. Jumi made a suspicious expression as she looked at the fairy. Chapter 50, 3 Gateways 2. Hansu walked on the path and headed towards the outside. His target was the entrance to another island. The crossroad that led towards the starting point of the 3rd floor was connected to the end of the 2nd floor, but it was also connected to other islands. If you follow the paths, then you will reach the tunnels that are connected to the other islands. As he expected, he saw a door that had light coming out from the gaps after a bit of walking, and he saw a long bridge along with a giant island beyond it. And when he walked outside, he could see someone. It's a clansman of Tijin. Did Mihi ask a favor? Hansu didn't know the details, but he knew more or less where Tijin would go. Hansu smirked as he spoke to the clansman. Did you form an alliance? The clansman nodded. Our lord formed an alliance with that Mihi. They are together right now. That person called Yeren separated because she said she was going a different way. Hansu just nodded. I just simply suggested a few things. Figure things out on your own. The clansman who had been messaging back and forth asked Hansu. Mihi is asking when you will come back if you go now. Hansu pondered for a moment and then answered back. 1 month if it's fast. As he said it, only if he was fast. He wasn't sure how long it would take exactly. I need to come out before the tutorial ends. If not, then it'll really be the end. It wasn't that they let them go to the next area just because the tutorial was finished. If they can't make a ship, then they would all die. The clansman made a sour expression. I guess you'll come near the end. 50 days since they had come into the 2nd tutorial area. After 1 month, it'll be the stage which was the final part of the tutorial. Hansu laughed as he nodded. We might not even see each other. Tijin's clansman nodded, and then exchanged messages with the lord above and spoke. He says he'll be doing just fine, so have a good trip. The clansman finished these words as he walked inside towards the crossroad. Hansu laughed slightly, warmed up his body, and then prepared his judgment and justice decratos. And then raised his head to look at the top of the tower, breathed in and out, and stood at the outskirts of the tower. To think to do such a thing, the fact that he found it is amazing. Hansu thought of one of the final brigade's members, Ralph Lauren, as he shook his head. Ralph Lauren, he had been dragged into the other world while working as a professional rock climber. The only thing Ralph Lauren, who had been charging through the tutorial with ease due to his strength, stamina, and perseverance, thought of when he saw the tower. This world gave something amazing every time you accomplish something amazing. Wouldn't there be something if you reached the top of this tower? Anybody could climb up from the inside, couldn't they? Ralph Lauren did not have such simple thoughts. And after he had prepared inside the tower, he started to madly climb the outside of the tower starting from the second month and finally reached the top and got into the final dungeon, 3 gateways, and had came out after barely breaking through the first gateway, after not being able to even have an attempt at the second or third gateways. Phew, there indeed was information regarding the second and third gateways, but it seemed like it was written to tell me to not get killed. So I didn't go. I just came out after clearing the first one. The reward was good enough with that much. First I will go up. Hansu stabbed the Justice of Decratos once at a time into the tower as he slowly climbed up. Justice and Judgment of Decratos basically acted as mountain climbing gear as it helped him climb up to the top. Stab the dagger and step on top of it. Stab the next dagger in, grab it with the right hand, fasten yourself with the chain, and then retrieve the dagger which you had stabbed in before. The action was simple, but due to it being repeated very quickly, Hansu climbed up the tower at an extreme speed like a spider climbing up a wall. Pajudug. And at the same time, something started flying towards Hansu. Kalek. Hansu looked at the disgusting-looking birds which were flying towards him, and then frowned. It looked like a bird, but had a human's face with a wide mouth that had razor-sharp teeth. These guys existed for those who climbed the outskirts of the tower, instead of going up from the inside. Ralph Lauren, you were lucky. Ralph Lauren had started from the 4th floor when he climbed up, so he had to deal with much less dangers. But he didn't have enough time to go through the insides of the tower, so he needed to climb up from below while going through all sorts of random beasts. Since the time it would take to cross the final dungeon for him, who needed to go through all 3 gateways, would be longer than that of Ralph Lauren, who only went through one of the gateways. The expected time of 1 month was just a prediction. It may even take longer. Charge through. Charururuk. And soon the Judgment of Decratos, which was tied around Hansu's body, sliced through the air ruthlessly. When the clansman comes, we will head out. Tejan, who had finished communicating, spoke to Mihi. Tejan, who had seen Mihi nod slightly, shouted loudly towards the surrounding people. Are you all okay? And everyone who was below the cross nodded their head as they breathed in and out roughly. A slight amount of regret was mixed in the eyes of the people who were gathered here, since that cross was a chance to revive somebody they love. Tejan had hesitated as well. Who will you kill to revive somebody? And even if you did revive someone else, they will be in a state of a tabula rasa. Are you even able to advance forward by working their share as well? I won't stop you from doing whatever you choose, but you cannot if you want to be with us. And a few people who could not stand it instantly left the group. Mihi did not stop those people, since if she had someone she loved, and this was the last chance to save them, then even she wouldn't be able to stop herself. And then Tejan looked at Mihi as he spoke. All the people here gathered after looking at you. Be the center properly. He had come here from Hansu's suggestion, but he would have left right away if he didn't like it. It was the same for those who were here. There was almost nobody left who had hopes of Hansu joining back here. He has so many things to do. Will we be able to see him before we get out? He actually wasn't a great leader or something, since he would go with them if they followed, but will just leave them if they aren't able to follow. And there weren't many people who were of the level where they could follow him. As if Tejan's words gave her strength, Mihi smiled slightly as she shouted at the people around her. Prepare yourself, we will resume after 10 minutes. Hansu was Hansu, and they had things they needed to do. I will keep as many alive as I can. Mihi clenched her teeth. That was the greatest resistance that she could do against this damnable world and the fairy. Save as many people as you can on the way up. And soon, about 200 people started to head towards a different area after getting through the 3rd floor. It took a whole day just to come up here. Hansu retrieved the dagger he had been standing on as he looked at the small door at the top of the tower. A very real-like moon, despite the fact that it was located a few thousand meters up on the top of a tower. And only a door was floating in the air. There were no other buildings behind the door. Hansu breathed in and out as he opened the door. Kachag. And soon he could see a dark area on the insides of the door. It's real, huh? Hansu, who was going against the rough wind, stepped into the door and then closed the door. And then he looked around the darkness, and then looked towards the weapons that were hung around his body. 7 double-edged swords and 8 blades. 18 medium and small-sized swords and the Decrado set. 7 striped cape and other defensive gear. Nirmaha's ring and 8 smaller rings. 1 necklace around his neck and a circlet. These were all the best versions of their category, which he could gain in the tutorial before the 3rd floor. And even the demonic jade crystal, as well as the philosopher's stone that he gained at the treasure hunt. Preparations were complete. Hansu touched his ear. As I expected, it's very inefficient. Kang Hansu's strength colorless, 60.8%. Stamina colorless, 61.1%. Agility colorless, 66.7%. Perception colorless, 67.7%. Mana colorless, 58.7%. Magic colorless, 58.7%. Physical resistance colorless, 58.7%. Magic resistance colorless, 58.7%. The clansmen of the Dark Mad Lord were much stronger than other adventurers, and there were over 150 of them. But despite eating all of those, he could only raise his stats by around 40%. Even if it was inefficient, it was a number that could never be reached by simply hunting monsters. The amount he had raised by staying here for 50 days was a mere 25%. Even if he focused on hunting for the last month, he would have reached at most 50%. Since he had to decrease the efficiency with the Rune Eater snake and had to raise the Nirmaha's ring as well. Though it's a bit risky, I'm going in. His stats were good enough to go through the 2nd gateway of the 3 gateways, so it was good enough. The 1st gateway was hard, but it was just the reward for those who had climbed up the tower. According to Ralph Lauren's intel, the difficulty raised significantly starting from the 2nd gateway, and the problem with the runes will be solved if one could clear the 2nd gateway. It's the start. Hansu jumped down towards the inside. These crazy times, they're all very zealous, just to save somebody they know, right? Jimin sighed tiredly as she looked at the few tens of people they had forced to kneel beneath the cross. Yaren chuckled at Jimin's words. Since it would have been hard for her too if her clan wasn't made of special forces. Standing on the same side as Tijin in Central Island was a stroke of good fortune. If not, then she would have shared the fate of the 9 dead lords among the 11 of them. But why have you told us to suppress the non-clansmen? We have already reached the limit of how many we can have in the clan. Yaren laughed quietly as she spoke. Bigger sister has something she thought of, let's see. Yaren breathed in deeply as she shouted towards the clansmen. Bring 9 of the non-clansmen people over there. Pardon? Yaren pointed at the cross as she giggled. And let's save these guys here. Pardon? These guys were lords. And then Yaren pointed towards the 9 people out of the countless in the cross. 9 lords who had gone missing along with Gukti in Central Island. She hadn't known if they had died or not, but it seemed like they did since their faces came up on the cross. This is a jackpot. She didn't know if the psychic powers would come back or not. But according to the fairy's words, they will have the memory and physique of themselves before coming in here. Which means the chances of them manifesting such things like the psychic powers were very high. She couldn't do anything about those she didn't know, but how could she let go of these people who had the chances of becoming a lord? Yuak. Ugh. Yaren made a content smile as she looked at the 9 people getting eaten in the grave below the cross. Even if she didn't put them into the clan, what would they be able to do if she always looks after them with blades up against their backs? And with this, the amount she will be able to control will increase tenfold, to 1,000 from 100. Very good. A newcomer shouted towards Yeren at one of somebody in the cross while she looked at the 9 lords who were growing out of the ground. Oh yeah, lord, this guy is probably a lord too. This guy. Yeren made a strange expression as she looked at the man who had just appeared in the cross. It means he just died. The clansman who had been speaking to Yeren nodded. Yes, I noticed him because I had come to the tower a bit earlier, and I saw people move in a large group with this guy as the center. This guy is probably a lord too. It seemed like he had quite a lot of people, but it seems like he died in the tower. It wasn't weird even for a clan lord to die, since it was very dangerous. Since the 3rd floor that they had gone through was that dangerous too. There was a chance where the injured forces from the 2nd floor could die while crossing. Yeah, then drag one more over here. And then another person was shoved into the grave as another man grew out of the ground. Jimin made a content expression as she looked at the 10 male and female lords in total. She asked the last guy who had come up because she wanted to know his name, since she knew everyone else's name but didn't know the new guy's. What is your name? The man made a confused expression and then muttered out his name. Wonjeong, I'm called Wonjeong, but where is this? I was clearly with Ahi and Myeongdong. Wonjeong, good. Yeren smiled contently again at the 10 people. I hope we can meet more people from now on. If an empty space appears, you need to fill it up. And that won't be much of a problem, since there will still be plenty of people in the tower. From now on, I'll lead. Yeren laughed coldly.